Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Ashoka University and ChangeINKK Trust, I welcome you all to this first ever conference on dyslexia and higher education in India, titled The Dyslexic Mind, Thinking Differently About Higher Education. For me, this conference has been in the making for more than 15 years. And then it took all of 3 weeks to put it together, along with Nupur Jhunjhunwala and Chandana Singh, and with full support from the entire Ashoka management. For many of us, today's event is more than a conference. It's a movement to open the dialogue that was waiting to happen for years. And I'm so glad that we were able to conduct this event. With that, I invite our Vice Chancellor, Professor Malavika Sarkar, to inaugurate this event with her welcoming address. Welcome, Professor Sarkar.
Thank you, Reena. Greetings from Ashoka University, and welcome to our one-day conference on the dyslexic mind, dyslexia, and higher education. We have an amazing set of speakers and panelists who will keep us enthralled for the whole of this program. Many thanks to them for joining us, and sincere thanks to Reena for putting the conference together and for her commitment to Ashoka's Office of Learning Support. We are really excited that this conference is taking place. A university is not just about knowledge and research and the granting of degrees. A university is a community, a nurturing environment, a space for the unfolding of minds. Such a space needs to include and accommodate people with challenges. Some challenges can be physical, like visual impairment or locomotor disabilities. But there are other challenges that are less visible because they are to do with the functioning of the human brain. And dyslexia is a manifestation of this kind of challenge. I consider myself uniquely privileged to understand and appreciate what this conference is all about. Because I grew up in an environment where I was introduced very early to the wonder that is the human brain. My father was India's first neurologist. As a young and very bright cardiologist in the late 1940s, he was sent off with a scholarship by the long sea route from Calcutta to Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, where he trained to be a neurologist. He was asked to learn this new branch of medicine and bring it to India. And he did that. He was a pioneer and he brought neurology to India. The result of this was that my growing up years, from the time I was a very small child, was spent listening to stories from him about all that the human brain can do, as well as its challenges. And everywhere at home and in his office in the hospital, there were models of the human brain made of cloth, plastic, and various material, which were parked at various strategic spots, so to say, that we all noticed. So I grew up in that environment. And although I did not become a doctor, I chose English literature instead. A fascination with the human brain is deeply embedded in me, and I am, for that reason, all the more excited that this conference is happening. Young students who come to us with dyslexia need to be understood and supported. A dyslexic brain, if I understand right, processes sounds differently from others. And there are many consequences of that. Apart from this simple fact, there are many other complex and fascinating issues surrounding dyslexia, and a great deal to learn about what we do with those with dyslexia in the higher education environment. Ashoka University is deeply committed to diversity and inclusion, and very much committed to helping and supporting young people with challenges. So for us, it is very exciting that such a conference is happening today. And I'm very sure that this is just the beginning of a series of conversations we will be having around dyslexia and how to help and support those with dyslexia as we go forward. This, I feel, is just the beginning, but it's a marker of the importance that this situation has for the university as a whole, that we have launched this conference. So my sincere thanks to the organizers for setting up this conference. Thanks to all the panelists and speakers. And I'm very sure that those listening, participating today, will go away having learned a great deal. I look forward to very enriching sessions that will follow. Thank you very much, and sincere good wishes to all.
Thank you, Professor Sarkar. It's interesting that you touched upon the brain and the neuroscience part of it, because we do have our keynote speakers who will be talking about the cognitive neuroscience behind dyslexia and the other learning conditions. You anyways have been a guide for us. You gave us the platform to bring forth this important aspect of inclusion at Ashoka. So thank you so much, ma'am. Well, talking about all kinds of minds and all learners, let me share with you the importance of contributions that various stakeholders in the field of dyslexia have provided across the globe. And to bring everyone's perspectives to this forum, we are fortunate to have a much revered line of keynote speakers and panelists today. So we have researchers, we have policymakers, practitioners, educators, parents, and people with dyslexia here with us today to share their experiences and their insights into this fascinating world of dyslexia. That takes me to our first keynote speech by a person whose name is synonymous with dyslexia awareness in India, Ms. Kate Kurawala. Kate is the founder president of Maharashtra Dyslexia Association. She has been working tirelessly since its inception to expand and develop the reach of this association so that children with specific learning disabilities like dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia have access to high quality testing, assessments, remediation, and to ensure that all these children get the best education within the mainstream system. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
Yeah, the stage is yours, Kate.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My warmest congratulations to Ashoka University and ChangeINKK Foundation for organizing this very innovative and pertinent conference. Since I've been asked to take a deep dive into special needs of children with an invisible disability in higher education, I'd like to start with a story about one of our own students, which illustrates some of the challenges that are not often touched upon. Rohit was one of our early entrants into higher education. He has significant difficulties with reading and writing. The admissions committee at the college was worried whether he would be able to manage the multiple flight of stairs to his classroom. But in reality, he actually found it difficult to navigate new schedules, new systems, keeping up with his lectures, getting to his classroom on time, finding his classroom, making new friends. The list was endless. The first day he went to college, he went to the library to get his library cards. And he was pulled up for his illegible handwriting with the comment, "This is what happens when we have to fulfill quotas in admission." Not surprisingly, Rohit struggled through the first term. He was quite miserable. He spent as little time as possible at college. And it was only regular, intensive counseling that kept him on track. His exams came along, the first term exams. And he had discovered that he'd been given extra time to finish his papers. But the seat in the hall had to be vacated because the next exam was scheduled immediately after. And he was describing this to his counselor. He says, I felt like a worm. Everybody was standing in the corridor and discussing what to do with me. The principal came along and asked what was going on. And he took a different view. He pulled up the staff for not having made adequate arrangements. And he took Rohit with him. I'm going to describe this in his own words, which he told us about later. He said, "Ma'am, he took me to his own office. He sat me down at his desk. He made space there for me. And he told me to finish my paper, take as long as I wanted. And he said, I'm sitting outside making phone calls. Don't worry, nobody's going to disturb you here." What a validation. This validation really changed his life at college. Suddenly, he was able to advocate for himself. He dived into campus activities, took part, joined some clubs. Ironically, he took over in his last year at college, he took over a student newsletter as editor. And he made so many changes and made it so innovative that it won several awards. The RPWD Act has settled once and for all whether students like Rohit should be in higher education at all. But attitudes and beliefs cannot be changed overnight. Within months of the act being passed, the Medical Council of India issued guidelines that stated that students with dyslexia and dysgraphia could not be admitted to medical courses. Seriously. It took a legal battle all the way to the Supreme Court to get that reversed. Yet, we know of several eminent doctors, even in Mumbai and across India, who have spoken about early problems with literacy and literacy acquisition and with learning. It's unfortunate truth in higher education that you may have a student, an all India rank in an entrance exam, a high stakes entrance exam, which puts you in the first couple of thousand. But by self-identifying as having a disability, especially a learning disability, you can become the prime target for misinformation, bias, and at every stage of your career, it will dog you. And I'm not overstating this problem. This is something that has been experienced by people in with other disabilities in every field. And unfortunately, we can see it happening with our students as well. There's no dearth of vision and innovative planning amongst our leaders in education, as we have seen from Principal Advani's act. But this vision needs to flow down to professors, lecturers, lab assistants, library clerks, and office staff. It needs to inform admission procedures, curriculum design, provide accessible textbooks, learning resources, to modify assessment procedures, and provide diverse learners with the right kind of supportive environment with which they can achieve their aspirations. Higher education is a gateway for our students to attain independence, become responsible, productive adults, and they are fully capable of this. It's our duty to provide them with the opportunities and the right kind of environment in which they can achieve this. Anything less, and it is we who will have failed them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for bringing up this concept of advocacy, misinformation, and validation confidence, because that is one aspect that we are also working on, so that students with dyslexia and other learning challenges can self-advocate and talk about their learning challenges with confidence, so that other stakeholders basically take them seriously and provide all kinds of help. Kate, you have been an inspiration for so many of us, including me. Believe me, I've been your fan for a long time, and I'm so honored to listening to you here while I'm anchoring this. So thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much. I now invite our next keynote speaker, Ms. Ritu Sen. Ritu is the director in the Department of School Education and Literacy. She is a 2003 batch IAS officer of the Chhattisgarh cadre. At present, she leads the discussion on inclusion and accessibility for NEP, which is National Education Policy. And it's a revised policy, and we would really request Ritu ma'am actually to talk about the changes that have been put into this policy, which now acknowledges and appreciates the different learning needs of students. So welcome, Ritu ma'am.
Thank you very much for inviting me to give the perspective of national education policy to the whole discourse of inclusive education. And I'm very pleased to be here because I saw the list of panelists and the amount of learning which is going to take place during this conference. So as you have already said that national education policy brings a very, very high focus on equity and inclusive education. So basically, when we highlight the learning for all, it also means involvement of all, and it also means to reach out to each and everybody, whether the child is socially, economically, or any kind of disadvantageous group. The child comes from any kind of group, and any kind of marginalization or any kind of disadvantage which he or she has is to be addressed. And when we talk about national education policy, then it is not only about the access to the education, but it also about equal opportunity for participation. It is also about equal opportunity for learning. And when we talk about access, retention, participation, learning outcomes, it cannot happen through only one instrument or one stakeholder. Then all of us come in the picture. And being part of the government and speaking at this conference for expressing that very clear intent which national education policy brings out, that we are committed to make sure that learning happens for all. I know and I appreciate that there will be the coming speakers would really speak about the neurodiversity and also the scientific aspects, also the do's and don'ts, what it is not, and many areas about specific learning difficulties with regard to dyslexia. But the key question which comes into my mind is that even after doing so much, lot is to be done. And I am present here to not only express what is core to national education policy, but also what is core to our intent of implementing the national education policy in the right spirit. And when I say this, I'm here to listen to all of you and all those who are connected us virtually. What can be done? How it can be done in the best way? I'm open to take the ideas, and I'm expressing my willingness to actually act as a facilitator or an aggregator or an accelerator to make this happen, because every child, not only with learning difficulties, but with any kind of disabilities, deserves a very, very robust support and an ecosystem which is enabling and which is empowering. So it is not about, giving them something which is which they need, but it is giving them something which they are entitled for. And when I say this, I say this with full conviction, because we feel, particularly being in Government of India and being the core person and the lead for inclusive education in Samagra Shiksha, I feel responsible that not only me, but all of us need to come together to make things happen and to get things done so that it reaches out. And why it should reach out? Because many of these invisible jewels, we even don't know, because they are hidden, they are not identified. So I believe that is the first challenge we need to work on. And we can work on this only when all of us come together like this event and talk about it, share about it, and also reach out to the people who don't know about it. Whenever we talk about dyslexia, we generally, immediately Tare Zameen Par movie comes into our mind, and we see how the journey of a student is depicted there. But there are many who are going through that journey and we don't know. And since we don't know, we are not able to provide support. And many a times we are not able to provide proper support because those who should be providing support are not equipped. They are either not having the right knowledge or the right skills to reach out. And I'm very happy to actually listen to the story Ms. Karuwala had shared with us. We need many more principals like that. We need many more teachers like that. We need many more kids in the society who could talk about it and who could work for this. So for me now, it is not about abled, especially abled, differently abled, or neurotypical, neuroatypical. I feel it is the diversity. And diversity, we should not talk about something exclusive, something fancy. Now we should accept it as a norm. And I think when we do that, then we reach towards the goal which NEP envisages. And that is not only diversity in schools, but diversity in society. And I firmly believe the students, teachers, and parents who are able to accept diversity at home, who are able to accept diversity in school, who are able to accept diversity among peers, colleagues, then they would be able to accept those people in the society. And then we would move towards an inclusive society. So it is not about only having inclusive schools, but it is making a step towards inclusive society. So I think the dimensions of dyslexia would be discussed in detail by the coming speakers and panelists. But only one thing from my side is that my endeavor would be, or our endeavor is, that we highlight the ability part. We highlight the advantage part. We create an ecosystem where we nurture it. And let us don't waste these talents and these jewels by just not doing what is expected from us. So let us, I often tell this to the other training programs also, like, let us not ask elephant to climb the tree, but let us give them the task which they can do the best. And let me also share this here, that during last 4 or 5 months of this journey, when I'm heading this inclusive education, I have met with many people who have overcome this challenge and made their life a wonderful, iconic kind of successful and with a lot of achievements. So I think as and Ms. Sarkar had said, that we also need to celebrate that and bring them out more in public, so people know about them and people celebrate them and people actually accept them. With this, I will end that anybody, whoever, in whatever way, wants to contribute to make inclusive education a reality, or provide opportunities for all kinds of children with disadvantageous groups. And I make it broader here because many may have challenges which are very different. And I invite all of you to come, share, contribute, engage, and support, so that all of us can make it possible, so that all of us can give a future to our children or our generation, which is not in silos, which is not in compartments, which is not in categories, but which is inclusive and welcoming. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ritu ma'am. I'm glad you talked about the invisible jewels and the ability and the strengths aspect of dyslexia, because that is what this this conference aims to spotlight and highlight, that students with dyslexia and other learning challenges are not only the ones who need support, right? Only it's all about their abilities, it's all about their creative and intellectual strengths that need to be highlighted and brought forth, right? So, and we will need your help. We definitely will approach you based on the outcomes of this conference, and we would like to take this forward with you and take it up with the higher education institutions across the country. So thank you so much, Ritu ma'am. That brings us to the next session of this event. It's a panel discussion where we have Chandana Singh moderating this panel. Chandana is a founder of Ashoka University. She is the mind behind the conception of this, of the Office of Learning Support that I head at Ashoka. Her motivation in the field came from a her personal experiences and her brush with dyslexia, and observing that how impactful appropriate interventions, remediation, and inclusive practices can be in the lives of students with learning differences. Chandana is a qualified special educator and a lawyer too. She has worked passionately, in fact, with children and adults with learning disabilities. And she is associated with various organizations like Home Creations Trust, an NGO that works with people with disabilities. She's also been associated with SPJ Sadhana School, Mumbai, and Mind Springs. With so many hats already on, we decided to crown her with another one, the moderator of panel 1. So Chandana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Reena. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and it's a pleasure to host this. I think the OLS has just come such a long way, and the partnership with Reena and Ashoka has just been completely amazing. This conference is a huge step for us, and we hope there are going to be many, many more. So our first panel, the one that I'm moderating, we call it Voices Braving the Stigma. I just want to give a brief introduction, especially on the word stigma. Why the stigma? Is there stigma associated with being dyslexic? Sadly, there very much is. Our students who have dyslexia, every single day of their schooling and college life, they struggle with the basics of reading, writing, and maths. As dyslexia is a hidden disability and it's not seen outwardly as there is any disability at all, these children are very often labeled as being lazy, careless, not working hard enough, and being slow at learning. It is actually a battle for them every single day to keep up their confidence and hope, and to carry on each day going to school to face this tsunami which hits them day after day after day. Very often, our children with dyslexia hesitate to reach out for help, and that is where the stigma comes in. These children are actually highly intelligent, very sharp, very perceptive and compassionate, creative, and they think out of the box totally. They are actually extremely hardworking and many times work much harder and much longer hours than their peers do. But the system is such that they are mostly assessed in ways in which it's not their abilities and intellect which get tested, but it is things which they find hard or struggle with which are getting tested. So honestly, my question and this panel, is there light at the end of this tunnel? As our children who suffer dyslexia silently, are they able to get help? Can they realize their complete potential and actually follow a career and a path to their dreams? Can they become successful achieving individuals in whatever it is that they want to do, be it engineering, be it business, media, or art? So that is what our panel is about. I'm really thankful here to our esteemed panelists who have agreed to join us with their very unique stories. Their journeys, and I've been speaking to them, are truly inspirational. They have all, with their hard work, grit, determination, support, and encouragement for many quarters, reached where they are today. These are amazing stories, and I'm very glad that they are sharing it with us today. So, as our panel will show us, there is actually light at the end of this long tunnel, especially if we work together at inclusion and give appropriate support to our children. This panel is actually about destigmatizing dyslexia and focusing on the strengths of these children rather than their disabilities. A big thank you to all our panelists, and let me right away introduce this very distinguished panel of super achievers to you. We have with us here Mr. Virat Bhatia. He is the Managing Director, Strategy and Policy at Apple India. Mr. Bhatia is also a board member of the India Leadership Advisory Board of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. He has a prominent role at FICCI India. He has worked at various roles at AT&T and Coca-Cola India. He has studied economics honors at Delhi University, and he has also studied at the Harvard Kennedy School and the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Thank you, Mr. Bhatia, for joining us. Our second panelist is Mr. Vivek Khare. He is a leading angel investor. He is an advisor on things 0 to 1. He is an advisor at Naukri.com and a strategic advisor at Let's Venture. He holds a master's degree in physics from IIT Kanpur. Our third panelist here with us is Ms. Shilpa Rao. She is the head AI-powered products and platforms, Optumera Strategic Growth Initiatives at TCS. She is an entrepreneur who combines art and science to improve how businesses make decisions. She has helped leading Fortune 500 companies rearrange their merchandising process with TCS Optumera. She holds an MBA in marketing and a Bachelor of Engineering degree in IT. And last but not the least at all, we welcome Mr. Kunal Junjunwala. He is the MD and the principal founder at AirPay Payment Services. He is the co-founder of Digital Hathi. He has a BSc from Rochester Institute of Technology and an MBA. And as he will tell us, he has also done his education from the London School of Economics and NYU Stern. Wow. So that was quite an introduction. And again, to say what binds our panel is that they have all battled a learning difficulty during their growing years. And this is where we are. So I'm going to start with the questions to our panel. Let me start with you, Virat. My first question to you. So could you share your very inspirational journey with us and how you fought through your learning challenges in school and college to actually make, this huge success with your professional life? Also, you, when we spoke, narrated to me about, your sort of all-round interests as well as your command over spoken English, which actually got you through. So could we hear about that and your journey, basically? Thank you. Virat, you need to unmute yourself.
I have never been in a VC which hasn't started with those words, but here we start. Unmute yourself. Thank you so much for having me in this very distinguished company of colleagues and friends. Obviously a safe place to be able to discuss everything that you want to talk about. I openly talk about the challenges that I've had, and I'm happy to share it here. Essentially, I grew up at a time when there was no recognition at all of this disability. And I grew up in difficult circumstances. Also, I transferred in different schools as an army brat. I did 11 different schools till I came to class 12th, and different sections. So what seemed like a really difficult childhood was also very helpful because it forced me to get along with all sorts of people in all sorts of cities and states, and from the heart of Uttar Pradesh, which can be tough, to the heart of Punjab on the Pakistan border, and then Delhi and many things in between. The challenge, the paradox that my life presented was that I went to a convent, a nunnery actually, for the first 5 years, which kind of built my spoken English fairly swiftly. And then I was in Kendriya Vidyalaya because the father was getting transferred. So what I did very cleverly, without knowing at that time, of course, was use English language as a weapon to get at anybody who thought I was less than them. So my spoken English and my love for debates and dramatics kind of overcome any of that, but anybody would have a chance to have a go at me. So in that sense, I was a little unique. The difficulty for the teachers was that I was being asked to as I told you, participate in, there's a lead role of Othello in my dramatics and annual day. And then I was having difficulty getting 60 out of 100 in the written exam. But I would also be the school debater. So there was this big paradox. And since the disability wasn't known, they just didn't know what to do with me. So, it was a big issue. But that helped me make sure that nobody in the class got at me, because they weren't sure what to do with me either. Because, there was this child who was scoring and didn't read a lot, but would be just very fluent with the way he would. And then I turned to sports, competitive sports and volleyball and cricket. And so it was also a way of being out of the class and being away from the tests and then excelling at that. So in my particular case, I have to say that I built around me a set of performances in school that would, obviously totally unknowingly, keep everybody so terribly distracted and impressed that, and I was the prefect. I was the naughtiest boy in the class, so they said he's co-prefect now, because that's the way to do it, right? You make the naughtiest boy the prefect or the monitor, and then make sure that he's looking after everything else. And so all of that came together, yet my marks wouldn't. I remember when I got 65 in my board exams in class 10th, and I walked in for my admission the 11th, my chemistry teacher stood there and said, "You've scored 65, she said, looking at me, which by the way wasn't a bad score in 82, and said to me that, "You know what, Vinod, you can actually get science and science stream." And I said, "Okay, then give it to me." And I took science, unimaginable for everybody. And I sort of went through science. Everybody thought I'd probably do arts or something. And that's how I kind of finished my school. Very, very difficult to sort of work through the curriculum, the writing part, the exams, the marks. College admission was also equally difficult, but because I was a sports person, that helped. I was swiftly into the best colleges I had offers. And then because of cricket, I actually transferred over to another college where, unfortunately, after a while, I got my specs and I couldn't play cricket. And then I quickly turned back to dramatics, to the point that I was earning back in almost 2,000 rupees a month from performing at festivals, the college festival. I was the richest kid in the college. Never took a penny from my parents in terms of scholarship. In terms of pocket money, because I'd be on stage all the time performing. So I'm just giving you the story in sort of school and college, how I made up for this big challenge. And I was doing eco honors, which is hundreds of readings, as you can imagine, a really tough course, probably one of the toughest in Delhi University, along with physics honors, through this stuff, and kept myself away from what otherwise could have been a humiliating experience, because kids can be cruel and get at you. The story sort of can be all over, but I think the lesson was, and I think the lesson for those who are listening, is that we should also look at kids who are in school. And I have two daughters, and one of them has mild dyslexia, one is slightly severe. What we've tried to do with them, and I would recommend others try, is to look at other things that the kids do really well, so that they are then respected by their peers, in addition to the fact that they want them to be compassionate and as Sareen put it, inclusive society, etc. That's not easy in school, because children are just cruel, period. So I think that is just a lesson from my life, at least. But I'm also probably an exception, that I could do so many different things, and was, an army background, so polite and gentle and chivalrous and all that. Everything helped. Just to be likable really helps. So if you're likable and you're good at other stuff, really helps. So that's the lesson that I would share with parents. Please look at developing a lot of other things in your children that they can be liked about, and so then that's how they will excel. I'll stop here. I think my 5 minutes are over.
Okay. Thank you, Virat. No, we will come back to you on a few other things that we discussed, but I will take my next question to Kunal. So Kunal, thank you for being here. And I just wanted to ask you about what your journey with dyslexia was all about. And you mentioned something about, starting some kind of work when you were like 13 or 14 years old, which actually was a really huge boost for you. And if also you could throw some light on, the whole, your higher education, what that experience was like, being in LSE, being at NYU, And where do you think, learning support is in India compared to what you have seen in universities there? So both, a bit on your journey and then on the higher education.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm glad we're talking about this in such an environment, because it's still a very sort of secretive conversation about, I have this, I think differently. So it's incredible that we can talk about this, and I'm very happy to share my experience. To start off with, I think all our stories are very similar from the context of saying we had a hard time in school in some subject or the other. The one thing that everybody highlighted was we were different, we knew this, we knew that. The one thing that we missed is, and I was called this multiple times, I was a cheater in class, and I'll tell you why. Because in math class, for example, the teacher would put up the sum on the table, and I would work it out in my head and have the answer ready with me. And when she would ask me, or he would ask me to show the working, I wouldn't have it. Right. So they always assumed I copied it from my, from my peer sitting next to me. And then the peer said, no, I got the wrong answer. So this guy's figured it out in some way or form. So, you went through that a few times because our brains just think differently, and we tend to understand what is being said before the other person is finished saying what they're saying. And that becomes very unnerving. When it comes to to my academic career, I was actually very blessed with the school I went to. They identified in a class of 30, they identified 4 of us right out of the 4th grade who had special needs. And they never made us feel like, for lack of better way of putting it, we were handicapped or we needed special education. We sat in a separate class right next door where we were given the additional attention. But they sensitized the entire class about it, right? It was never taught to us saying you're different or you need to do X, Y, Z things. The kids knew that we needed a little more help, and they encouraged it. And like Virat mentioned, I was terrible in my education. I didn't know my ABCDs till the 5th grade, to be very honest. The only reason I could write my name was because there was another Kunal in my class. He wrote it, I memorized it, and I simply copied it. It was as simple as that. When we did reading classes, when we were reading, as you would when you're in the younger classes, I would sit at the back. So by the time the class finished reading the chapter twice, I had memorized it. So I would just pick up on where the person dropped off and recite from my memory. So I went through that pain until my sister started her computer class in the 8th grade, and I was in the 5th. And I got intrigued by the fact that she was typing something on this electronic device, and it was doing something magical on the screen. And I picked up on that, and I started sort of spending my breaks in the computer lab, bugging the teachers and the assistants to teach me what they were doing. By the time I hit my 7th grade, I was actually doing 10th grade level programming and college school projects, and that's what became my go-to thing as an out for my lack of success in academics, right? And the school encouraged it. My friends encouraged it, and that's when I decided right out of my 8th grade to get a full-time job. To give you a sense, again, it was not because we needed the money or any of those things. It was my way of, or it was my outlet, or it was my personal success that I was going after. I was not that great in sports, but to spend time on something that I was good at, and to be able to focus on it and get encouraged towards it, even though I was probably always the last performer in my class. I would, if I would get 40 or I would get 4 on 10 and barely pass was a celebration for me. Just the fact that I passed my test, and that's sort of been my journey. As I went, I realized that till the 10th or till the 12th, in Bombay, we have the HSC till the 12th. Academics matter, learning mattered in terms of performing specifically in the classes that you have, performing well in those tests. But as I went to Rochester to do my undergrad and then went to Stern and went to LSE for my MBAs, I realized that it's quite the opposite. My Rochester undergrad application actually carried a CD with all the work that I had done and not my grades. And I very candidly told them, look, I haven't performed. My grades don't talk a lot about who I am and what I've done. But here's the stuff that I've developed. And this is why I'm going to join this degree. That's why I've done my bachelor's in IT. If you value that, you value a learner of that sort, please accept me. And they did, and similarly, with my MBA, I told them, look, the academics didn't matter, but the fact that I was able to work and build something out of on my own is where it mattered, where it came out. So my only sort of 10 cents on this entire thing is, yes, like Virat mentioned, focus on what the kids can excel on. Send them in that direction, nudge them down that direction. And I think a lot of that is happening at this point of time, but it needs to precipitate or it needs to crystallize to the lowest level. I think that's what's really important. And then that's my 5 minutes on what my journey has been.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back on that again. So I'm going to direct my next question to Shilpa. Shilpa, thank you for being here. So Shilpa, again, your journey with dyslexia, and I know that you spoke about being very good with art and in the creative space. And that I think many times is, sort of a default option for a lot of kids who have dyslexia, but you sort of navigated through the challenges. You did a degree in engineering as well as an MBA. And, I recall you said that you chose institutions close to home. I mean, you found your own ways of navigating your difficulties, but you got where you wanted to. So could you share that with us?
Sure. Thank you so much. And it's my privilege to be here with the esteemed panelists here. So a little bit on my journey. I mean, when I was growing up, dyslexia was not something which was known, and I didn't know I had dyslexia. So and in India, most parents and kids don't know that they have it, but I knew I had difficulties, right? So for example, I still can't tell from left to right, and I still have like my one thumb painted and the other not, just to kind of help me navigate that, this is left and this is right. And it kind of continues, right? So right from things like D's and B's, and I started, creating things which helped me to navigate life. For example, in the B's and D's, I started drawing a bat, and then it became a line, and now I'm okay with it. To say that how the B is oriented and know how, how do I write that? And then reading, and as Kunal kind of totally mentioned that, he used to sit on the last bench. Actually, I had glasses. So I could not sit on the last bench. I couldn't see the board. So I was one of the front benchers, and it was very difficult. You have this reading classes and one kid stops, and then the teacher randomly says, okay, now you start from there. And it was a nightmare. My legs used to literally rattle as I just couldn't read out loud. So what I did there was I used to kind of finish reading that entire chapter and memorizing it. And just like Kunal said, I was to memorize it at home. So my mom actually was my reader, and it was like a story to me, and I used to completely memorize it. And in fact, I spent early hours in the morning. So in fact, I was in the first grade where I was waking up at 5 a.m. and just memorizing my chapters so that I could just get by in the school. So it was a very different experience for me. So it didn't really come out that, she's not doing well in studies, but it's just that I had to put so many extra hours just to get to a level playing field. And the same thing happened with math. I mean, 2 + 2 is never equal to 4 for me. And, it's just that. And I had to really memorize a lot of the additions also. So we had a schedule at home where, after playing and you come back home, you have to, wash your hand and feet and memorize all your tables. And then with the tables, I used to do the additions, and that's how I got to math. And then when it got more complicated, I used to just write down whatever the teacher kind of solved on the board and just write it down on paper, and then I used to color it. And what I found was that I was very good at visual memory, and I used to remember it. And I used to remember it so well that I knew exactly on what page what was written. So I could, bring that out whenever it was required. It was like all in my memory out there. And that helped me navigate my entire school years and even my learning years. And yes, it was tough because I was putting in so much extra hours, and I couldn't do like simple things which I thought was like so easy for others. And while other kids were like playing and doing sports, I was not doing. I was like, sitting and doing all this work just to get a level playing field. And the funny thing about that was, the parents of the other kids were saying like, go look at her, see, she's like working so hard, she's like a bookworm. And they were like mad at me, like, why is she doing that to us? And I was like, I'm just trying to get on the level playing field. So it was a very funny situation growing up. And art was something which was like a happy place. I felt that this is a place where it doesn't judge me. I loved colors and I was just good at it.
The same is what you said to me, which was a lovely word.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just felt that I was like just meant to be there. And after 12, when you actually choose your career options, and I had an option to choose art and everything else. So I did give my art exam, and I was in Mumbai at that time, and JJ School of Arts, it's like one of the prestigious colleges in arts, and I did their entrance exam. I actually got admission. But then when I was, doing that exam and coming out of it, I felt like, no, this is not what I want to do as a career, because this is my safe place. I want to keep it safe and, go whenever I want to kind of go there. It's not something I want to do as a career. And I always loved inventing. The invention was not that I was kind of building Legos or breaking out things and making things out of it. It was more that I was inventing things for myself. So I was inventing how do I kind of figure out left and right? How do I figure out these and these? It was like every day I had to kind of figure out a trick to kind of navigate everything that I had to do in the world. And I thought maybe if I could, use that to do better for others, that would be different. It'll kind of be a game changer. And the reason, as you kind of rightly mentioned, the only reason I chose the engineering college, which I chose, was because it was close to my house. It was in 1 kilometer radius. And, through the school and college, I had kind of created a system around me that I have to spend that extra hour to kind of read. I have to spend that extra hour to kind of color the formula. I had this whole colored math book. My math book was more colorful than my art book, actually. So I had all these things extra that I had to do, which I had to spend time. And if I had to spend time commuting, I wouldn't I would just be tired doing that. And that's how I, got into choosing engineering and then getting into that.
Okay, thank you. Vivek, thank you for waiting patiently. This question now comes to you. So you said to me that, the one size fits all approach to education needs to change. I agree totally. I want you to just, sort of highlight that and tell us about your journey. You had struggles with spellings, writing, you narrated a few incidents to us. And then eventually you, graduated from IIT Kanpur. So what was that all about?
Yeah, I was listening to all the panelists and it resonates so much. I've gone through the same struggle all through my life. And the movie Tare Zameen Pe, I think, was a revelation for many, including me. And suddenly everything fell into place, what you had gone through. So when I look back at my school days, I can break it up into two parts. I was, for the first 7-8 years, I was in a convent school in a very, very small place called Obra. And then my father got transferred and we were in Lucknow. And in Obra, it was a small power project. There was a small colony where we all used to stay. And most of the teachers in that school were also part of my social circle, my parents' social circle. So school in a way carried throughout the whole day. And the refrain was, "Usko aata sab kuch hai, ye pata nahi exam mein kya karta hai." Because when it came to spelling, my grammar was all over the place. And for whatever reasons, I'm not blaming the teachers. It maybe they themselves were clueless. The awareness about the dyslexia was not there. And therefore, when it came to the written exams, I was very poor. I was very good at maths. My science was good. But if everything had to be judged by the written words, then, that used to fail me. And, again, the same, the B, D, P, Q, all were same for me. My AL, LA, all were, spellings were very confusing. And, two incidents still stay with me. I'm 51 and I'm talking about something which happened to me when I was in 6th or 7th class. And when I look back, it's like 40 years back. And those two things are still like a raw nerve to me, that those things happened to me. And I just want to, narrate here because they will give the people who don't have dyslexia a sense of what we go through.
Yes, please.
So this is 6th or 7th class, I don't remember exactly. And there was this new teacher who had come and she had given a kind of fill up the blank in the English class. And it was straightforward things like, where were you born? And, and things like that. And the reason I remember the born was because I had written, I was born in, I thought I'd written Bhopal. And she was reading out the answers of various students. And she was very dramatic and she says, and Vivek was born in Bhopla. Because again, I mean, for me, the LA and AL always same. And I had ended up spelling Bhopal as Bhopla. And, the whole class burst out laughing. And that became the joke for a very, very long time. And how's Bhopla? And I got stigmatized, but I was innocent. I took it as a joke and I let it go. But that fact that, the teacher had called out my spelling mistake is something which stayed with me for a very, very long time. And there was another incident. I remember there was this new teacher who had come and she was basically supposed to teach us science. And she had given a quiz. And this is, straightforward, simple, fill up the blanks kind of thing. What's the third planet from the sun? And things like that. What are the various states of water and things like that. And these are facts questions. Either you knew them or you didn't know them. And she graded my copy, gave it back. I had 10 out of 10. There were 10 questions. I had got all 10 of them right. And I had 10 out of 10. And I had those things very good from the teacher. And I'd been a very poor student. My grade never reflected. I was like, there were 35 students in the class. I was always 34th or the 35th. So for me to get that 10 out of 10 and very good was like a super aha moment. And I used to share my seat with the girl who used to top the class. And she saw my copy and she was completely aghast. How can Vivek get 10 out of 10? And in the next period, which was the English period, and the English teacher was our class teacher, she took the copy and she said, something is wrong. Please have a look. And this English teacher went about, okay, this spelling is wrong, this spelling is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And she made the 10 out of 10 out of 3 out of 10. And then it was like things are back to normal and this is the way things would be. And I was surprised and I was like, boss, if I knew the answers, how can you give me 3 out of 10? But those were the things. And so this is still 6th, 7th class. And then my father got transferred. And this was in mid-session, I got transferred and everybody was really scared what kind of school you'll get admission to, that too in the mid. And with the grades I have, with the marks I had, they were really, really scared. And I mean, that is my serendipity. I thanks my star that, I ended up going to a school where the principal was a maths teacher. And at the time of admissions, I was asking, okay, this is a kid who needs admission. I still remember he gave me 3 questions and all 3 questions were maths. There was one question to do the factorization. There were other questions which was in geometry, prove two triangles were similar and things like that. All of that was cakewalk for me. And I did extremely well. And he gave me admission. And another thing which I want to tell about this school is that I was very good at maths. I mean, I used to be just the way I think Kunal was saying that I was way ahead of the rest of the class when it came to maths. So while the class would be in the 3rd chapter, I would already be on the 7th, 8th, 9th chapter. And, the maths teacher was always kind of very, very dismissive of that. Why can't you stay with the class? Why do you have to show off? That was her word. Why can't you just stay with the class? So this is the culture, or this is the environment in which I get transferred to a school. And I just want to narrate two instances. So the first day in the class, I've just gone, it's mid-session, it's a maths class, and the maths teacher have a look at my copy, and he immediately says, boss, you know your maths. And, the people who are good at maths, obviously you don't get everything right. So there is a lot of cut paste, you do something wrong and you cut and you write it. And that teacher was smart enough to realize if you know your maths, your copy can't be like pristine. It will carry the fact that you had been trying. And he was very, very, very clear. Your maths is very good. And it was like, I'd have to worry about one student less. And he had this very, very beautiful thing where if there are other students who were struggling with the maths, he would send them to these so-called good students. Ki Vivek se pooch lo. And I can't tell you how much that did to bring back my confidence.
Confidence, yeah.
So that was one incident. And the second thing was that I still remember, and I still thank my teacher. He was not even my regular teacher. He was a substitute teacher who had come to take a session because that particular teacher was absent. And it so happened that I was supposed to take part in debate, and I had jotted down my points. I remember the topic was, nuclear family versus joint family, and I had decided to speak in favor of joint family. And I jotted what are the advantages of joint family. And he said, okay, let me see what people are presenting. And he took my copy. And believe me, I was dreading again that, in the front of the whole class, he's going to recite out, these are the 40 mistakes that you have made. These are the spelling mistakes you have made. These are the grammar mistakes you have made. But to his credit, he stuck to the points, and he was like, these are very, very good points. These are really amazing points. And, those two incidents within the first 3 or 4 days of that school completely changed me as a person.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
And for me, then I never looked, but I was very good at maths. I gave my JEE twice. I cleared both the times. I wanted to do physics. I came and did physics. And again, the thing is that JEE again is a paper which does not judge you on your on your written skill. It's basically your logic and the maths. So there I've excelled. Right. I was lucky enough to work for InfoEdge Group, which was a startup, and these places. I mean, the thing is, if you're good, it's pure meritocracy. So if you're good, you keep getting the opportunities, and the life I've been blessed.
Yeah,
I thank everybody for that.
Yeah. Lovely. So I'm going to jump across to Virat. I want to pick up this part of Vivek, what you said, the confidence. And Virat, I recall you said this to me, which I think should be a quote, which should be used as a quote, where you said that if you can get them to the workforce with their confidence intact, there will be a huge success with their creativity advantage. I really think this should be the tagline, because, for a lot of our children with learning needs, by the time they get through schooling, the confidence is actually which takes the biggest beating. But if we can support them through these tough years and get them to the workforce with their confidence intact, I think then you said then their creativity is actually an advantage. Could you just tell us something about that from your experience?
Oh, yeah. So I think, just as everybody said, you go through a schooling system where basically your tagline is can do better, right? Because my copies were full of can do better because they couldn't come to terms with, how does this guy perform so well in these spaces and then not be able to write an exam? So the challenge really is to get them past the school into colleges and etc. and stuff like that. Now, the difficulty is, with the exception of JEE or other colleges, the rest of the exams are fairly detailed, and you're basically, their university is only on 12th class scores, so there's no chance of these kids getting through. So I think that at least the private universities, and I congratulate Ashoka for having a whole process and system in place to have started that. And I hope, honestly, for Ashoka's sake and for everybody else's sake, that other private universities would do this. It's a shame that the government doesn't. They should be the first ones doing this, but they're not sort of yet got around to doing this at college levels and ensuring admissions and support and written assistance and writers and stuff like that. My daughter, I think I gave you the example, on her own scores 60, with the writer scores 97. So she's actually a 97 kid, But when she writes on her own, she scores 60. That's the gap she opens up, when writers are given. In my case, of course, I think I mentioned to you, when I got past all of this, and as I said, I camouflaged it exceedingly well with everything else that I had to keep everybody distracted unknowingly. On my second day of my internship in my training class at the Hyatt, my manager turned around and said to me, "You're going to handle some of our most important work and accounts," because he could just sense that. I think it was said by Kunal that we can complete very quickly, because our only way of understanding, since we don't read well and sort of write well, our only way of understanding is to listen very carefully, right, and then memorize it, and then we think in images. We almost think in images for everything. So then in workplace, in sales, in marketing, in advertising, in all of these skills, unless you're in accounts, you can actually be so much ahead because you've actually sorted out the problem in your mind. You've got a solution because you're listening very carefully, you're internalizing it because you're forced to do that. The other thing I think I told you was that my nightmares, even today, I only get one type of nightmares, which is I wake up thinking I have to give an exam. That is my nightmare, even now. So, but when I went to work,
all our panelists are agreeing on that. I think.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, it can't be any different.
And
so
actually, I do too. So I wonder what that
is. It's actually a nightmare. I get this written exam, and I wake up and I say, "Oh my God, thank God I'm not giving exams anymore." But the thing is that, so that happened. And at work, then I was also very fortunate. I had, because I had sort of writing disability, I had assistants to take dictations and notes. And I'm very fortunate. I have one right now. She's very kindly joined this call. I'm going to call her out, Vidya, my dear friend. And I look 7 to 10 times better than I am because she'd help me put everything better. And I am the fastest to respond on mails. I provide the most detailed inputs. And it is completely different because the person on the other side can't tell that he can't write, but he knows this stuff. And so all of that assistance, I think, and if you can get them to work intact, it will work. And I want to sort of say this with सार का सानी का एक शेर है कि चमने एक तरह के बू से बात बनती है, हम ही हम हैं तो क्या हम हैं, तुम ही तुम हो तो क्या तुम हो. So actually we need to get all of them into the room to have them work.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Now, in this whole journey of dyslexia, I think we talk about the role of schools and remedial and support. But I think the first and the very critical role is played by parents. Parents need to support, parents need to understand, and parents need to have realistic expectations. Kunal, can I ask you, you've spoken a lot about the support given by your parents. Can I ask you to speak a little bit about that, please?
Sure. And it's incredible the kind of support I've got from my parents. So just to contextualize this, I come from a family of academics. Everybody's a qualified chartered accountant, were the toppers in what they did. Grandfather was income tax commissioner from that sense. My older sister's excelled, she's done her MBA, etc. Super brain from that context. But not once has anyone ever said, boss, tu padhai nahi karta, tu hamara kaam kaise karega? Because they're chartered accountants, they live in numbers. I come from a finance family and I don't understand finance to save, if my life depended on it. I will still put an extra zero or a less comma or a full stop somewhere incorrectly. And like Shilpa said, 2 + 2 = 5. I'll read 10 rupees as 1,000 rupees because somebody's put 10.00. So I'll skip the percent, the full stop completely. But never ever did I feel the pressure from my parents or my father for that matter saying, look, you have to take over my practice. Never ever. It was always find your vibe, do what works for you, you'll figure it out. And kind of let me go through my journey the way I needed to go through. Right. My mom, thankfully, never knew when there was an exam coming up or a test coming up. She just said, "Yeah, niche jaake khel le, aaja, as long as she thinks I'm happy and then nothing else. She would go to school, the teachers would complain. She said, "Bacha hai na, hota hai. It's okay. He does, 10 other things that are tough." So, it was, and like Vivek said, Tare Zameen Par, I think, highlights exactly what a parent should not do till the end when, Ishan's father realizes the value or what his son is capable of doing. I was fortunate enough to have parents who realized that from day one. I didn't have to go through that extreme journey of negativity in that sense. I went through only the cream of the end of Tare Zameen Par. So I was very fortunate with it. Between my sister, my parents, and then that rubbed off on the larger family. Because when they said no nonsense, everybody sort of said, okay, no nonsense. This is not something we're going to pick on Kunal for, right? And that was that. So I think it's so important to have that positive ecosystem because it rubs off on everybody. They don't look at you for your failures. They look at you for your successes and your effort. And that's what matters. Nothing else.
Thank you. And Shilpa, you as well. I think you said that your mom was a reader to you. I've played that role a lot, so I know what that's all about. So parents were supportive, Shilpa?
Absolutely, absolutely. My parents were like super supportive, and as you rightly said, my mom was my reader. And my dad's family actually had a lot of, some of my cousins who are like much older to me. They also had, dyslexia. Obviously, it was not known at that point in time. So they also had those learning difficulties, and my dad had actually seen it. So he was very determined that, I want to make her successful. So he was like super supportive in, trying to help me with tips and tips and tips and tricks in terms of, do something like this or try that out. And another thing that he also did was he encouraged me to kind of participate in every competition. So there was like no competition which was not left, right? Be it like music, drama, everything, elocution and everything. So it actually gave me a lot of exposure, and it was not that you have to win the competition. It was like important to participate, because once you participate, there is just so much learning which happens. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. So that really helped me to, get exposed to a lot of things and, build my confidence that way, right? Otherwise, it's very difficult to, get that confidence in.
Thank you. So I'm going to, there's so much to hear from each one of you. And I know I've spoken to you, so there is a lot more, but we are so constrained by time. So I'm just going to give you all one minute each to conclude, to tell us what do you think, needs to change in India for learning needs, or something about what you thought worked for you. Any concluding sort of remarks? And Vivek, maybe you could tell us about how you thought, maybe I'll start with you, how you think it's actually this creativity is helping you with your investing as being a really successful angel investor.
Yeah, I guess, at some level, as one of the panelists had said, that we are able to see the big picture better. I guess at some level, we are able to connect the dots better. And that has definitely helped me being an investor. And the second thing, as what you said, what should change, I think I very strongly believe that awareness that you can't ask a fish to climb a tree and you can't ask an elephant to climb a tree. I think that part is very, very important for all the teachers. I was very lucky that I was at IIT, and there it was not based on your written exams. I have dropped out of an MBA simply because of that, because I realized that if they're going to judge me only based on my written ability, I will never be able to do well. And I dropped it. So one of the advice, or one of the things that I would love to see change, and I work very closely with Plaksha, is that the learning should be experiential, the assessment should be continuous. And that, I think, itself will ensure that we don't miss out on the good students simply because we are judging them wrongly.
Thank you. Wonderful. Virat?
I was going to say that I think the most important piece would be, as has just been highlighted by Vivek, I think we need to make sure that we can get these kids like other kids, pass the school and college with whatever aid they require, and then put them to test. I don't think everybody will be as fortunate as I am, because I had several different skills, and as I said, army background, so just tough coming at this. And or somebody's very good in maths. By the way, I was terrible at maths and unbelievably good at geometry. I have no idea why, but geometry, as you know, only lasts 7th and 8th. But I think the whole piece of struggling sort of can go away, can reduce dramatically. For parents, please back them and make sure they can come up on spaces they excel, because that will build their confidence and respect in the classes, because children will be brutal. It's very difficult to train everybody. Teachers, of course, know what to do, and the system needs to get children with writers, with support, with whatever aid is required to the workplace, because that's where they will be really tested in life for 45 years, for 40 years, rather than 3 years at college and 2 years in +2. So that's the plan that we need to put in place.
Thank you. Wonderful. Shilpa?
So I think one is to get rid of the stigma, right? And it's the awareness which will help to get rid of the stigma. One of the parents I was just talking about what they told me about their kid, and they were saying that she eats up all the words, and she's not able to spell, and she's not even able to kind of do well in her oral exams and all of that. And then I asked her, what is her strength? And the parent did not have an answer. So it's important that you focus on the strength rather than figuring out all the weaknesses and like focusing on that. And that's a mindset change that if we all do, and not just for dyslexia, for everything else, can really bring that change in.
Thank you. Lovely. Kunal?
I think a lot has been said around what we need to solve for children who are going through the journey. But I think there is a lot to be done for adults who are dealing with it today. Because as we grow up, we don't have an excuse, I had something else to do. We're accountable for ourselves. Me as an employer, in that sense, today when I go out into my various teams and I talk to them, and before this session, I was speaking with them. I told them about me talking about dyslexia and all. And I had 3 other guys come up and say, or 3 individuals come and say, oh, we have dyslexia, right? And it was not because of some sort of filtration process that we went to or any of it. It's just because we have decided we will not hire based on marks. We will hire based on individuals and their work experience, not based on the marks that they got or the degrees that they've done. And we emphasize a discussion rather than a test before they get into the workforce. So I think it's as important to address this from a workforce perspective and help employers understand how do we identify these individuals, because they're assets, without a doubt. They bring a different perspective. Yes. But I think what we all struggle with, at least here at AIRP, is how do we identify these individuals, and how do we use them to their full potential, and how do we help them achieve that is really the tricky part, as much as it is for the kids to get through their schooling.
And can I just say one more thing? I think one very important role is for the parents, because parents, in a lot of cases, even in school my kids go, refuse to admit to the fact that the children have disability. They're embarrassed about it. They're into this, how can my child have disability? I am, a civil service officer, or I'm a successful businessman or a professional. This is impossible. And they fight it for a very long time, and the child suffers. So my request, please do the tests in 2nd or 3rd. If you're seeing the signs, get them the help they require and move them to schools, whatever you need to do. Please don't be in denial. Please, for Christ's sake, don't be in denial.
That's wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Don't be in denial. Test them. And they are huge assets to us. Look at them like that. Thank you so much, Shilpa, Virat, Vivek, and Kunal. I can't tell you how amazing this panel has been. And it is so wonderful that we have been able to discuss this on a platform like this. For me, it's a conversation which has come straight from the heart, as I think it has for all of you. And I'm sure we will meet again. We have a lot more to talk about. Thank you so much, and really grateful for you all to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Reena, back to you.
It's an extremely emotional moment. And I must say, Virat, Shilpa, Vivek, and Kunal, the impact of your sharing has been so high. let me tell you, I've already received 2 emails from 2 people from wherever who are saying that, they want to tell me that they have dyslexia, and they are, sitting in their offices right now. I don't even know these people. I mean, it's on my phone. It's right here. Yeah. So I've received emails from 2 people telling me that, they want to have this conversation with us. And it's amazing how, everybody here as adults, you all are talking about your journey. And the goosebumps that the educators and the parents are feeling right now. I know I've received 5-6 messages from people whom I know. They are saying this is that student. Virat we have many Virats, Shilpas and Viveks and Kunals in our schools and colleges. And I know we have quite a few at Ashoka University also. So yes, Virat, what you talked about being good at theater and not able to write well, we have so many of them. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And this brings us to our next session, which is a keynote speech by somebody, from whom and from whose books I have learned about dyslexia. So when I was in the US, the only person I knew was the research oriented person was Dr. Sally Shavitz. And I had thought that, the day when I'm able to bring Sally to India, I think I'll be, that would be the highest point of my professional life. So it's just so happens that we have her here. So welcome, Sally. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about you to give everyone a view on, how what your awards have been and how you have contributed to this understanding of dyslexia across the globe. So Dr. Sally is the Audrey G. Ratner Professor in Learning Development at Yale University. And she's a co-founder and co-director of the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity. She's also the author of about 350 scientific articles and chapters, as well as the award-winning best-selling go-to book on dyslexia. And I think it has been updated, and there's a second edition now available by the name Overcoming Dyslexia. So welcome, Dr. Sally. I won't take very long because I know you are also short on time. So are you here?
Yes.
Great. So good to see you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Make sure they can see your slides.
Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Before I even begin, I just have to tell you how honored and grateful I am to be part of this. The discussions, both the panel and the keynotes that preceded this were just extraordinary. I attend a lot of conferences. This has to be at the very top. The thought that must have gone into having it and the speakers, thank you. So having said that, I will talk to you about aligning 21st century science and education. And that's about closing the action gap in translating scientific progress. And there's been huge scientific progress in dyslexia into policy and practice. So I'm going to begin with telling you about a person, his life experience. He was excellent at concepts, getting the main idea. He was a C- student in English. He struggled with success at foreign languages, and he was a very slow reader and still is, and he has to reread a lot. He uses his finger to keep his place while reading, and he gets angry at people who told him, "You're not trying hard enough." On the SAT, his verbal was 475, which is not very great. So you ask, well, what does he do today? Of course, if I'm telling you about him, he's dyslexic. but he's John Irving, a very admired and best-selling and brilliant author who also happens to be dyslexic. And I was fortunate to be able to spend some time with him. And here I want to share with you what he said about being a writer and being dyslexic. Dyslexia has become a benefit. In writing a novel, for example, he wrote the popular Cider House Rules. It doesn't hurt anyone as a writer to have to go over something again and again. One reason I have confidence in writing the kinds of novels I write is that I have the stamina to go over something again and again, no matter how difficult it is, for the fourth or eighth time. It's an ability to push myself and not be lazy. I ascribe this to the difficulties I had to overcome earlier. So I want to tell you a little bit about the science, and that begins with the history. From its origins, dyslexia has been an unexpected difficulty. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Way back in 1896, a British physician, W. Pringle Morgan, wrote in the British Medical Journal about a young man, Percy, at age 14, who's always been bright and intelligent, quick at games, and in no way inferior to others of his age. His great difficulty has been, and is now, his inability to learn to read. And this is so important, what I'm going to say next. The schoolmaster who has taught him for some years says he would be the smartest lad, not only in the class, but in the school, if the instruction was entirely oral. And this is very important. This is the scientific, this represents the scientific validation of unexpected. So on the left, in green, shows the results when we evaluated typical readers. So the top line here, the straight line, is scores, and these are the scores, and this is the grade, and the straight line is intelligence, IQ, and the dashed line is reading. And you can see in typical readers, intelligence and reading are linked. They go together. So if you have a very high level of intelligence, you're most likely going to be a very good reader, and so forth down the line. And then we did the same methodology, but our population was dyslexic. And what did we find then? What we found was in dyslexic, here's intelligence, and here's reading. IQ and reading are not linked, they diverge. So dyslexia is unexpected in people at very high intelligence, because remember, in typical readers, IQ and reading were linked. If you want to read more about this, you can find it in Overcoming Dyslexia, the second edition, on page 103. And we also published these data in Psychological Science in 2010. So this has given risen to the 21st century definition of dyslexia. And this is really important because there are older definitions of dyslexia and people don't like to let go. But this is the definition that reflects what we have learned clinically and from science. It's also known as Public Law 115-391, and it was passed in December 2018 by both houses of Congress and signed into law by the president. And here is the key. And this really, I think, reflects all the dyslexic speakers we have heard up until now, that dyslexia is an unexpected difficulty in reading for an individual who has the intelligence to be a much better reader. And we have to make sure that this definition is used, understood, and disseminated. So it's the 21st century definition. As unexpected, it's very important because it establishes as a dyslexic, you can be very bright and yet read slowly. You don't have to score below a certain level of reading. That's not what dyslexia is. What dyslexia is how you go about reading, what you have to do to decipher a word, the manner in which you read, and how long it takes you to read. So I'm just going to spend a minute or so talking about why does print have meaning? Why, when you see the lines and circles, you know they make letters which make words. So this is very important. We as humans evolved to speak. Speaking is natural, and it's been around hundreds and thousands of years. We did not evolve to read. Reading is not natural, it's acquired. And it's only been with us 4,000 or 5,000 years. So the lines and circles of print take on meaning when they're linked to something that has inherent meaning, and that is spoken language, particularly to the sounds, the phonology of spoken language. And I really appreciate this comment from Leonard Bloomfield when he wrote, "Writing is a way of recording spoken language by visible marks." Doesn't that make sense? And here, this figure shows you that now we know that the origin of the difficulties in dyslexia is getting to the sounds of spoken language. So it affects spoken language, particularly word retrieval. The person who's dyslexic knows in their brain what they want to say, but to utter the word, they have to access and retrieve the sounds, the phonemes, put them in the right order, and then activate the muscles of articulation. In dyslexia, there's a problem in retrieving the sounds. So not rarely, a person will know what they want to say, but it's not what comes out of their mouth. Dyslexia also impacts reading, connecting letters to sounds, and especially in being able to read fluently, that's automatically. It impacts spelling, and it impacts learning a second or foreign language. Imagine you're having difficulty with your primary language that you've been exposed to since you were a young child, and here you have to learn a second language. That is problematic, and I'm proud to say that our university, Yale, will, following a very rigorous process, offer a partial waiver of the foreign language requirement, where you have to take a course in a language in English, but that's based on the history, for example, or culture of a country that doesn't speak English. We've spent some time in investigating the neural systems of dyslexia. We use a process called functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI. And here you see one of the children that we've evaluated, and she's looking up through, you can see almost like a periscope here, and she has her right and left hands on buttons, and we'll be showing her different tasks, and she will respond to these rhyme, to these match, etc. And we've learned that there is a neural signature for dyslexia, and that is the inefficient posterior reading systems. What do I mean? So here's the brain, the left side of the brain. Here's the front, anterior. Here's the back, posterior. And in a typical reader, when they have to do a reading test, 3 areas light up. One right here in the front, shown in green, Broca's area, and 2 in the back of the brain, in the parietal temporal area, and this very, very important area in the occipital temporal region. And that region is known as the word form area. and that facilitates automatic, rapid reading. So in a dyslexic reader, and we've studied many, you have increased activation here, but look at the back of the brain, posterior. You don't see these two regions, particularly this occipital temporal region. And that's so important because that is involved in automatic reading. So since this is inefficient in dyslexic readers have to turn to a secondary, a more manual rather than an automatic system. So they can get to the end, but it's slower and choppier. And here I'll just emphasize again, we now have neurobiologic evidence for the requirement of extra time. A dyslexic reader is not an automatic reader, but I refer to it as a manual reader. So its reading is much slower and choppier. And this is so important, the dyslexic reader would rather not need extra time, but requires extra time because they do not have these automatic reading systems available to them. The word form area, this area here, that doesn't activate in dyslexic readers is inefficient. So the dyslexic reader has to rely on ancillary secondary systems. Here you see the front of the brain and on the right side of the brain. So these are helpful, but they're not automatic. So you have partial compensation for accuracy, but not for automaticity. Reading in a dyslexic is not automatic. It's effortful. It's even with extra time, that dyslexic individual feels rushed. So what has brain imaging taught us about dyslexia? It's given us a neural signature for dyslexia. That is the inefficient functioning of neural systems for skilled, fluent reading. And it's made at long last visible a previously hidden disability. I'm going to just tell you briefly about a study I've been involved in. I'm a developmental pediatrician at Yale, and I was asked to see children whose parents were concerned that once they began school, they didn't seem to learn to read. So I saw these children who were cute, seemed bright, but were struggling to learn to read. I tried to look at the research literature at that time, and it was wanting. So I said, we've got to learn about this. So together with Dr. Bennett Shewitz, we developed the Connecticut longitudinal study, the CLS, and you can read about that in the second edition on pages 25 to 35. So what we did is we enrolled in an epidemiologic sample survey children in Connecticut who were entering kindergarten. They're about 5 years old. And this was in 1983. And what we were able to do is enroll 445 boys and girls, which was about 95% of all those who were eligible. And it's a longitudinal study, 38 years and going strong. So in each of their grades, beginning in kindergarten, we evaluated their cognitive ability, their academics, their self-concept. We asked teachers and parents to provide information about everything, absences, latenesses, reading, etc. And now we have followed that group for 45 years, till they are now 45 years old, which is 82% or 363 of the original. And this is we're so excited because what this will allow us to do, and we're up to doing that now, is I know now as a parent and now as a grandparent, you always wonder, what can I do for my child? What would be most helpful? And maybe what sounds good but isn't so helpful. So we have, beginning at age 5, the predictors. And we also have the long-term outcome. So which predictors are related to the most positive outcomes and which to the less positive outcomes? Very, very exciting. And what have we learned? We've learned that dyslexia is universal, affecting all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. And we found something that is incredibly important, the high prevalence of dyslexia. It affects 1 out of 5, or 20% of the population. Often we hear from schools, oh, there aren't that many, or it's 4%. What we did that schools don't do is we evaluated every child. And this is what we found. And we also found that it affects both males and females. For a long time, it was thought it was only males, but evaluating both males and females and learning several other things, it showed it's both. And if you look at specialized schools, certainly here in the US, it's almost equal males and females. And we learned that dyslexia is persistent. It doesn't go away. A student can get improved somewhat, but they'll always be dyslexic. And what that means is we have to screen early using evidence-based methods. It sounds so right, but sadly, rather than common, it is rare. So the result is many, if not most, dyslexic adults, including college students, are frequently, far too frequently, I would say, unaware that they are dyslexic. The good news, the earlier the better, and it is never too late to learn more about yourself, and you can. So when Dr. Benachewicz and I saw what happens with dyslexia, we said, do we have to screen these children earlier? And we developed screeners for young children, separate ones, kindergarten, 2nd and 3rd grade, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, and they are evidence-based. But we also developed a screener for adolescents and adults, where scientists, physicians, and advocates were not distributors. So we gave the screener to Pearson Publisher, who named it the Shaywitz Dyslexia Screen. So this adolescent adult form applies to ages 14 to 65. It is a fully digital 10-item form driven by the computer, with items read aloud to the individual via human voice audio files. How long does it take? 5 minutes. If you want to learn more about it, you can contact pearsonassessments.com/Shaywitz. Okay, so here we're interested in college students. I'm going to talk about dyslexia in adults. And basically, and what we heard from that wonderful panel is dyslexia is basically a paradox. What do I mean? Here, Dr. Benachewicz and I developed the Sea of Strengths model of dyslexia. And it's in the book. And what that says in dyslexia, you have a weakness in getting to the sounds of letters. So that causes slow, hesitant reading. And that is so visible early on in school. At the same time, that is surrounded by a sea of strengths. And I heard several of you say it, big picture thinking, conceptualization, comprehension, reasoning, critical thinking, vocabulary, problem solving, empathy, general knowledge, and comprehension. So this weakness is surrounded by a sea of strengths in big picture thinking that becomes more and more evident as development proceeds. And it's very important in universities because dyslexics are the exemplars of cognitive diversity. And now I want to share with you a study that we completed and was published this year. It's called the Yale Outcome Study, Dyslexic Student Outcome, 5 or more years after graduation. We studied Yale students, half of whom were dyslexic and half of whom were typical readers. We were interested in learning about their academic and social experiences, both in college and the workplace, 5 or more years after graduation. And what did we find? We found that dyslexic college graduates did not differ from typical graduates in college and in the workplace. So our findings were that in college and in the workplace, both dyslexic readers and typical readers experienced positive outcome. And, you know, Yale's not a bad university, so it wasn't that they were taking all easy courses. In conclusion, our results offer an unexpected yet reassuring, strong, reassuring picture of the college and career success of individuals with dyslexia. Graduates with dyslexia appear to compensate for the disability by accessing their strengths. And so many of them, as part of our evaluation, we asked them to just write qualitative information that they'd like to share. And so much of what they wrote related to perseverance. For example, dyslexia has helped me in the long run because I've always worked harder than my peers. And I'm more determined and resilient because of the disability. And perhaps my dyslexia has made me a harder worker and has taught me to keep innovating and coming up with more effective methods to work. And I don't give up easily. And several of you touched on this, and I want to summarize some of this, and this is in the Overcoming Dyslexia second edition on page 359. And that is atop the list of the best in virtually every profession are dyslexics. Writers, as I mentioned, John Irving, Richard Ford, John Grisham. Business leaders, financier Charles Schwab, economist Diane Swan, entrepreneur Sir Richard Branson, all dyslexic. Doctors, cardiac surgeon Toby Cosgrove is dyslexic. He just retired as head of the Cleveland Clinic, which is ranked the #1 hospital in the United States for cardiac surgery. And he's become a really good friend, as well as radiologist Beryl Benissarat and anesthesiologist Fred Romberg. Scientists, Nobel laureates, biologist Carol Breiter, and chemist Jacques Dubochet, and renowned geneticist George Church, and lawyers, dyslexic, a lawyer, you bet. And a really good lawyer, David Boies and Gary Cohn, are really wonderful examples. So I'll just repeat again, just about everything I've said you can find in the second edition, Overcoming Dyslexia, that I wrote with my son, Jonathan, who is a psychiatrist. And you can also read a wonderful comment by Nobel laureate Bob Dylan. And you can look at our website, dyslexia.yale.edu, for more information. And I just want to thank you both for listening to what I have to say, but for arranging this extraordinary conference and the speakers who are participating. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sally. Like I said, Overcoming Dyslexia was the first book that I read when I was trying to understand what dyslexia is all about. And I can't wait to, start the second edition of this book. You are not going away. You are part of the next panel that we have. But before that, let me invite Dr. Nandini Chatterjee Singh. Dr. Nandini is a cognitive neuroscientist and currently a senior project officer at UNESCO. She works on learning in the context of literacy, emotion, and music. She established the first cognitive and neuroimaging laboratory in India at NBRC in India. Her work in biliteracy led to the development of the first standardized tool in India by the name of DALI to screen and assess dyslexia in multiple Indian languages. Welcome, Dr. Nandini.
Thank you so much, Reena. If I could, I would jump out of the screen and first come and give everybody who's participating here a big hug. It's just been such an amazing experience. And the second thing which I would love to do is, and I'm guessing probably the people in the panel would recognize why, is if I had the opportunity, put them into the MRI scanner, okay, to be able to study their brain. But dyslexia fascinates me. One of the things I want to sort of say at the outset as I share my slides is I'm sort of a joker in the pack. I have not trained as a cognitive neuroscientist, but I'm a physicist by training who came in to study cognitive neuroscience after a career in birdsong learning at UC Berkeley. But it's been absolutely fascinating. So I have a million things to say, of course, but let me try and get through this as quickly as I can. And I hope you will forgive me for racing through all the things I want to share with you. Okay. So Sally's already put the context beautifully, and let me also acknowledge what a privilege it is to be speaking on the same platform as her. She's clearly a leader in the field. But what she's clearly established is reading is not natural. It's a cultural invention. And something that is quite unique to reading is there is no unique area in the brain meant for reading. In fact, reading happens because of a superpower that we all have, and that is neuroplasticity. It's the ability of the brain to change based on learning. And regions of the brain that are meant for hearing, listening, and speaking rewire because of learning to form a circuit which ultimately gets you to read. Okay? So it's sort of you have three components to this. You have sounds, you have symbols, and you have words. Okay? And therefore, the mapping of sounds to symbols to ultimately become words is what the process of reading does. And over a period of time, as we practice this, we develop an invisible circuit, okay, which allows us to read very efficiently. In fact, there is now excellent work to show that we have two pathways to read. One is the direct pathway where you see a word and without reading it, you can instantly recognize it almost like an object. But every time you encounter a word, all of us do this. We assemble those sounds together to read. It's called the decoding model of reading. So this was one of the most exciting things about reading that we uncovered after functional imaging became available to us to try and understand how reading emerged. The brain was no longer a black box, okay? Now, another thing which so far we haven't talked so much about dyslexia is that it does depend on writing systems. And there are multiple writing systems in the world, okay? A few of them are listed out here, the major ones. And one of the things that we are interested on is the alpha cerebri or the akshara, because this is very relevant and pertinent to the Indian context. Okay, but the Chinese system uses logographs and pictures. And at one point in time, there was a lot of excitement to see with the children who had problems reading English, whether they would read more easily or better if they were reading Chinese. But that was not the case, okay, because Chinese is more visual. So these are different writing systems that we are all aware of. And why is this of consequence to us? And this is where it becomes extremely exciting as well as challenging for a country like India. India has multiple languages. It also has multiple writing systems. Okay? So we have 11 officially recognized writing systems. And these are the multitude of languages that we have. Now, children who go to school in India have to learn to read at least 2 writing systems. Imagine the nightmare if you have dyslexia. Okay. When I started to study reading, the first thing I wanted to do was to try and understand, how do children learn to read? So before we go on to do that, and this is a bunch of people we call biliterates, children and people like us who read multiple writing systems. I want to do a quick comparison about the 2 writing systems that most kids in India have to learn. Okay, so you have typically English and an Indian writing system, and most of them belong to the Akshara group of systems. The sound symbol mapping in Akshara systems is quite transparent. And I want to lay attention on this because this is something that could be interesting and could be exploited when children learn to read. It's a transparent writing system, but it's visually complex. Okay. English, on the other hand, is a system where the sound letter mapping is not very conscious. And you have the typical but issue, which all of us encounter at some point in time. So you have to memorize certain things. English is written left to right. It's linear. But Hindi or Devanagari, which I'm taking as an example here, is non-linear in its writing. Okay. So here are examples that are there at the bottom of the screen here, where if you look at the letters, they are fairly complex. In some cases, you also have the issue of what is called articulatory sequencing. So the symbol is presented earlier, but is actually uttered later. So there are different challenges to learning to read these multiple writing systems. So how do kids in India, people like you and me, learn to read? We all did this in school, and many of us have learned 3 writing systems. So we worked with kids in a school in Gurgaon. National Brain Research Center is located in Manesar. And the closest schools were in Gurgaon. And we worked with a school where we actually brought in young kids to study how their brain reads multiple writing systems. We did a multitude of tasks at phonological level, at comprehension level, at fluency level. To cut a long story short, here were the 2 interesting findings that we had. Vocabulary turned out to be one of the best predictors of literacy. So oral language is clearly a great predictor. But, and here is what was interesting, literacy in the mother tongue was a much better predictor of literacy in the second language than anything else. And this, I think, is a great take home for us in the Indian education system. We simply do not pay enough focus on learning to speak in the native language. The focus is always on sending kids to English. Many of them don't speak English, yet they learn to read English. And so the only bet they have is to learn to memorize it. And imagine if you are dyslexic, after a certain point in time, you might have a challenge with memory. And remember, every child with dyslexia does not have phenomenal abilities. Okay? We've seen some of the gifted ones today, but there are a number of kids who just find this hugely challenging. Okay? And many of them, because they don't master English, does it mean that they never get diagnosed for dyslexia? That shouldn't ever be the case, right? So when we imaged these kids, here was what we found. And I'm just showing one image to drive home the point. Both hemispheres of the brain are activated when kids learn to read, Hindi and English. You can see very similar circuits. There are subtle differences, which I will point out in the next slide. But notice the fact that the circuits look very similar. Okay? And here is the one point I certainly want people to take away from a scientific nuance of this presentation is you cannot be dyslexic in one language and not dyslexic in the other. You have to have reading challenges in both languages if you have true dyslexia. One, the extent of dyslexia might be different depending on what might be the underlying processes that you are using to learn to read. Okay? So that was one important and new take-home message that we had from our study. Okay? The second thing that we established was that reading was biological, okay, something that Sally's already talked about. But here's another aspect, which I will very briefly touch upon, is on the left side, you're seeing the shared circuitry for reading. But on the right, you're able to see that even kids as young as 10 years of age are able to separate in their reading pathways between English and Hindi, depending on the transparency, the way the sounds and letters are mapped. So that's called orthographic depth. So the brain recognizes this very early on and develops different strategies to learn to read this. Okay, so these were two important findings that we had. But whilst imaging these children, I also realized that there were kids who were not reading like the others. And so I was clearly curious to know why these kids weren't reading as the others. And that's how I got into dyslexia, okay? And we still don't have good epidemiology in India, but if you just look at worldwide numbers, and if I just take a very conservative estimate of 10%, we have nearly 35 million kids at risk for dyslexia between the ages of 3 and 14 years. Okay, only 5 in 100 receive any accommodation and are identified, which means we have a lot on our plate to do. Okay, with Ritu speaking earlier on, I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to now make a dent in the field. So here's where some of the conversation I think needs to change, and that is dyslexia is a consequence of neurodiversity that we see. It's part of the human condition. And probably the conversation needs to change to say that it's no longer a disability, it's just a different way of learning. Okay? And that's what we wanted to try and bring in when we developed DALI, okay, which is the Dyslexia Assessment for Languages of India, which has got tools for teachers, which is the JST and the MST, junior screening, middle screening for children in grades 1 to 5. And then there is a language assessment battery called the iLab, the Indian Language Assessment Battery, that actually does a detailed assessment to identify the dyslexia. And then there are inputs on remediation, on depending on the kind of challenge the child has, how can remediation be structured for the child? Okay. What has this been able to do for us? I apologize, this is a difficult graph. But on the extreme right, on the top quadrant, are the children who are able to read really well. When we did a population study, this is what we found. On the extreme left at the bottom are the kids who actually have dyslexia. But the two corners actually represent people who often get misdiagnosed as dyslexics, but actually just have poor exposure to the language. Because going back to what I said earlier, you cannot be dyslexic in one and not in the other. So we need to make sure that exposure does not get confused with dyslexia. What did this allow us to do? This allows us also to be able to separate out what are the different subtypes of dyslexia, based on which we are able to provide and structure the remediation much better. And here's what the brain of a child who's with dyslexia looks like when he or she is reading, and you can see the reduced activation that was shown even earlier. Okay, so you do see reduced activity, but here's what's fascinating. With remediation, a lot of children also recover and learn to accommodate dyslexia. So here are some take-home messages for policy, is that identifying children early is key if we are to make a difference in policy. Okay? Because we know neuroplasticity is best when it is at a young age. It needs to be provided to children. And children must be assessed in the mother tongue and the second language whenever assessments happen. Okay? We now have an online dyslexia assessment tool, which is performance-based and goes for kids from class 1 to class 12. Okay? Anybody can log in and try it out. We are piloting it right now, and we are looking for people to partner with to validate and standardize this. We developed this during the lockdown when people were having trouble doing diagnosis. Everybody has talked a lot about the gifts of dyslexia, so I won't spend time on this at all. But the one message that I want to say is that it's being born and with your brain structured in a particular way is something we have no control over. What we need to do is to find ways that people can convert the way their brain is wired into abilities and capabilities. Because if there's one thing that I have learned is, so far, our paths have dictated our lives. What neurodiversity has taught me is we need to choose our paths based on our strengths so that we may flourish and become the best version of ourselves. And I think that's something we really need to do so that this becomes an inclusive, happy society. Whilst every dyslexic might not be gifted, what I know for certain is every individual who has had dyslexia or a learning disability is kind. And I think that's what we really need in this world, kindness. And that is why we need people who think and are just kinder people as human beings. Thank you so much, Reena. I hope I haven't exceeded time too much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nandini. It's always a pleasure to listen to all the brain images, see all those brain images and the latest research that you are into. It's really, really fascinating. Thank you so much. But in the interest of time, I'll be quickly jumping to the next panel. This is a panel which is moderated by Nupur Jhunjhunwala. Nupur is here, right? Nupur leads partnerships, monitoring and evaluations for UN Women India, and is also a parent to a teen dyslexic. A lifelong advocate of building equitable and inclusive societies, Nupur has extensive experience of working with multiple stakeholders for the advancement of gender equality and women empowerment, financial inclusion and economic development. So welcome, Nupur. I hope you're here.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Reena. And welcome, everybody. I am cognizant of the fact that we're running a bit late. I do want to thank everyone who is listening in and all our speakers, especially our international ones on this panel, for making the time. I understand there's a time zone difference, but this has been in the making for many years for us now. In India, we finally have the new education policy, which is very, very focused on inclusiveness, as we heard earlier today. And this provides us the impetus where India is now ready to start including students with learning disabilities and dyslexia into the higher education space. From the little knowledge that I have, Ashoka is probably the only university that has a full-fledged OLS system in India, much unlike the West and other parts of the world. So I'm very grateful for have our panelists who represent some of the top universities from across the board. So here's welcoming Marie Sadelmeyer, who's the Assistant Director at the Academic Center for Excellence, Access Services at Bryant University. Jim Weiss, Director of Accessibility and Disability Resources at Wellesley College. Maria Grazia Bever, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, the Learning Support Coordinator at King's College. Reena Gupta, as we all have been hearing her earlier from OLS, and of course, Dr. Sally Shestwitz from Yale, who we heard a little bit earlier. If everyone is here, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask everyone, the question is, we've heard so much about dyslexia today, but why should any university encourage neurodiverse student body? We know that most of these kids don't do well academically. All of us here come from organizations which are academically very, very high and demanding. So why do you all do it? How do you all do it? So if I may, can I start with Marie? Bring you in here, and then we'll go to the rest.
Thank you so much. And thank you for asking me to be here. It's an honor to join you. And it's been exciting to hear your last two keynotes and the things that they have to say. And I will refer back to the Yale study that that was shared, and the fact that the students who are coming in with learning disabilities and dyslexia are incredible contributors to our society. And unfortunately, sometimes higher education is the path they need to go through and they need to work through to get where they want to be in terms of a career. And so every day I see students come in with these amazing skills and abilities, and they can think outside the box. And as the study indicated, they work so hard, right? Their work ethic is amazing. And so I believe that they can contribute so greatly to what's happening, you know, in our overall society. And I'd like to do anything I can to get them there. So although I am here as someone who needs to provide accommodations as per the law, that is such a small part of my thinking when I'm working with students, because what I'd like to see is pave a path to success for them. And that's certainly what I strive to do every day.
Thank you, Marie. So Jim, I'd like you to jump in here and give us a little bit of a perspective from your university.
Sure. So, you know, working in kind of accessibility and disability resources, I also have kind of a college-wide perspective. And the way I view things is that we're all on a spectrum. And by having students who represent students, staff, and faculty that represent kind of all aspects of that neurodiversity, I think it brings a more richness to the campus and also introduces what's sometimes referred to as universal curriculum design, that includes all individuals or attempts to involve all individuals with disabilities without. And I think that makes the college experience more rich and inclusive. I think it helps our students go out into the workforce understanding that it's not one size fits all. And that's, I mean, I think kind of that universal approach is one that I would stress and encourage folks to consider across the world.
Thanks, Jim. I'm going to come back to you with the question on the universal design, but let me go to you, Dr. Shapeswitz. You are a pioneer in this space and probably one of the first to start the process of inclusion at universities long before it was mandated by the law, much like Reena here in our country. So my question to you is, how can you tell us a little bit about how you worked with the admissions committee? Because as we've seen, most of these kids don't get detected, and it's quite difficult to sort of sort out who are the clever ones and the smart ones, even though they're academically probably poor performers. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think working with the admissions committee is very important. So when I started out, I actually went and met with the admissions committee frequently. And what did we do? In the United States, you're not allowed to ask if the person has a disability. So my worry was that when people looked through these applications, oh, slow reader, oh, this, oh, that, oh, that's not for us. So what I did is we would pick admissions folders and go over what was written. And I would explain to them, well, slow reader is not slow thinker. And things like that. And we went over and over and over it. You know, because at the beginning, I think one of the major problems we have with dyslexia is it's so poorly understood by the general public. And we have to use it more, have it have meaning. And thank you for having me give the keynote. I try to bring out some of the more meaningful aspects. So what I would do is I would meet with the admissions committee, and then I would try to meet with each of the people separately. Because sometimes people don't like to speak up, they don't want to be embarrassed. And slowly, but surely over time, and you saw the results of our Yale outcome study. And so I just want to mention, as a follow-up, I speak to faculty and I give conferences and explain dyslexia and answer questions. And what's so remarkable is when I'll speak at some faculty conference, You say, oh, well, why am I doing this? And then afterwards, I will get so many phone calls, almost in a whisper. But it sounds like I may have this. How do you recognize it? And also make people understand so they don't misinterpret symptoms and become aware of what the possibilities are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes so much sense. So let me go to Maria then. Maria, tell me a little bit about how you all are working at King's to bring the policy and make it more inclusive. We've heard from the 3 universities in the US, and then Reena, I'll come to you in terms of the Indian perspective.
Yeah, hello. I don't know, here is afternoon, so I don't know whether it's a morning or afternoon for you, but very glad to be here with you. Yeah, here at King's, well, we're quite fortunate because any students that present with traits of dyslexia, they think they might have dyslexia or any other specific learning difficulty, they're invited to submit a screening questionnaire that we review, and if we believe that they show indicators of specific learning difficulty, we will fund a diagnostic assessment, and that would be the evidence that we need to put in place reasonable adjustment for them. And in the UK, we're also fortunate because there is support from the government if the students are home students, so they get a variety of support in the form of individual learning support sessions and software, and is all paid by the state, basically. So we facilitate that process, and that is incredibly useful because it provides really the support they need to progress with their studies. But of course, at university level, we also engage with academics, and that is in the form of provide training so that they can think about how they can modify the way they teach and they assess. This is a very slow process. They're really baby steps in that sense, but it is something that is ongoing. And of course, we also can provide sort of what we call like learning plans or individual learning plans that it's sort of inform the academics, the tutors of the challenges that the students might have so that adjustments can be put in place for them if and when necessary. So there is a kind of a variety of tools that we can use to ensure that the students they're not sort of put at any disadvantage, and everything is there for them to show their potential.
That's excellent, Marie. So it's an interesting perspective where the government is directly supporting the universities to provide that support. Much different in India, Reena. So I do know Ashoka University has a commitment for inclusiveness, both from a perspective of financial as well as ability. I want to ask you a little bit from the perspective of you being a front runner in the country, in a country where people don't want to even acknowledge that there was a learning disability or a difference in a child. How do you work with the parent community or get your children to come in and actually, even consider Ashoka as a university, considering that it's so young, it's about 10 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So, and yet establish yourself as such a credible educational institution in the country today.
So Nupur, let me just explain the way Office of Learning Support was set up in 2016, and that was the year when the RPWD Act in India was also updated, and learning disabilities was included in the list of disabilities to be supported at education level.
So just one second, Reena, just for those who don't know, RPWD Act is really the Right for People with Disabilities Act of 2016 for the country. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so 2016, when we started the discussion around supporting students with the invisible learning conditions, and specifically dyslexia and other specific learning disabilities, Ashoka, was the only university which was open to this idea of setting up a separate center, a separate office that would start supporting, first of all, spreading the awareness about this. And the Dean of Academic Affairs at that time did understand that, there are students with dyslexia, and this is a real thing. And at Ashoka, we need to have something like this. So, the journey has been very, very interesting, and it's been 5 years. The parent community you asked about, it's only recently, Nupur, that, now we have parents who call us like every few days. We get a call. On an average, we get a call in a week where a parent is asking about the support system that we have at Ashoka, because the word has now gone out that Ashoka is the place if you have a learning condition, and if you qualify, if you are interested in the courses that Ashoka offers, then they have a strong support system to guide you through your learning challenges. So it's the parent community, the students, the faculty, I think all the stakeholders have come together to make this happen at Ashoka in India.
Thanks, Reena. So a larger question that I want to ask, and I think, Jim, you touched upon it a little bit, is the concept of this universal design of curriculum. I think when a child moves to university, it's difficult just being away from home. And then, suddenly they're alone, they have this tag that they may have never had before in their life. And they're lost, they're fighting the battle of being an adult versus still being dependent on the family. How do we create environments and curriculum which, irrespective of whether the child has or chooses to use the services, thrives? So for example, Kunal spoke earlier where he went to Rochester, and I spoke to him as an adult and I said, but you didn't declare in your app that you were dyslexic. And he said, I never had to do it in college because of the way the curriculum was designed. I just learned better because of the way they taught us. So Marie, can I bring you in to talk a little bit about that?
Well, that, yes, it is the key, basically. Being able to design a curriculum that is inclusive is that where we all kind of strive. And I guess that at a university, it can be quite difficult because it is really engaging a variety of academics, a variety of courses, and they all have different challenges. But for example, starting for exams can be really difficult for neurodiverse students, and writing under time pressure and so on. So even a change in the way that assessment is done and providing kind of a different way of assessing, not just one way, but so for example, allowing people to show what they know in different ways. And it could be by writing, it could be by presenting, it could be by debating, it could be, in by portfolio. Of course, it is dependent on the course, but just introducing a different way of assessment can certainly provide a much more inclusive way for students so that they can play with their own strengths. But again, getting to that can be quite difficult. And I think that the way is just to engage perhaps with a school or department that seems to be more interested in that, or where it is easier to do it, and use that as a pilot project, as a model that you can sort of showcase across the college. So that, in my experience, has been one way sort of to try to, achieve more inclusivity.
Interesting. So Dr. Shetwitz, how have you worked with the faculty? What has been your experience at Yale?
First of all, the faculty is diverse.
Okay.
And well, you can imagine. And I think what I've tried to do is inform the faculty of what dyslexia is. No matter how bright or accomplished or educated people have outmoded views of dyslexia. So to work with the faculty at conferences individually. And that's when you find out a number of the faculty are dyslexic. And I think we are very, very fortunate that at Yale, that people who are in administration have been very, very supportive. For example, at our Yale Center, we, anybody that thinks they might have trouble learning or have dyslexia are referred. And it's amazing what different stories they have and what different beliefs there are about dyslexia. So we try to speak with the faculty, have them understand, and what people were just saying. I mean, one of the things, for example, is learning a foreign language. We were seeing so many students that were working so hard, students who were dyslexic, on their foreign language requirement, and they weren't succeeding, and it was taking their time from courses they could succeed in. So very fortunately at Yale, I was able to work with people at the highest levels and suggest that maybe we can have a partial waiver of the foreign language requirement so that people could take a course in English, but based on helping you to understand the country, the culture of that. And we made it very rigorous because people were getting upset.
Yeah.
But when I had to present this to the foreign language department, I said, uh-oh, they're not happy. But now and this is something you should share with your university, it has been a remarkable success. The faculty are all on board. The administration, and that's very important, let's never leave out the administration. And the students are succeeding. So it's not a giveaway. But we made it a very rigorous route. And for example, the dean and the faculty participate in helping to select another course. And I would really recommend that because we were seeing too many students just having all the energy soaked out of them for no purpose.
Right. Interesting. So Marie Sadelmeyer, can you come in here a little bit and tell us your experience at Bryant about, especially in our conversation, we spoke a little bit about ESL. And I think that's relevant to India because even though we have English as one of our official languages, most people learn in one of our 26 official languages at a school level. So it would be interesting to hear from you. Please go ahead.
So one of the conversations that we had was about universal design of instruction, and disability services professionals, I think across the US and elsewhere around the world, have been carrying that flag for a while, right? And been saying that universal design for instruction is important. But the whole idea behind universal design is that it's important for every student. And here in the Academic Center for Excellence at Bryant, we also have our support services for our international students and English as a second language students. And as we discuss universal design with our faculty, we are finding that if we focus on just disability, it's harder for them because they see that as a small segment of the population. But if we focus on all students, and we also talk about our English as a second language students, that we can really show that universal design concepts can apply for them and can help them to learn more effectively in the classroom. So for example, even doing something like adding captions to your videos can help English, students who are studying the English language to know exactly what's happening in the classroom and to better access the material. Also, if we provide note-taking technology that students who may not be able to write quickly, whether they have learning disabilities or they aren't able to fluently write in English, are able to succeed. So it's really a matter of taking those universal design concepts and helping the faculty to know that It's not just students with disabilities. And university-wide, if we talk about this, it's much better than if it comes just out of my area, because they don't necessarily see that then as applying to the whole population. So I add my voice to other voices on campus.
That's interesting because most people don't realize it, but audiobooks and digital readers were actually created for people with a sight problem. And now they become mainstream in the form of universal design that almost everybody is using it. I know my husband, for example, only listens to podcasts and audiobooks because that's the only way he can catch up on his reading per se. And we accept it so normally for somebody who might not be neurodiverse. But when it talks about being accommodative and you should allow audiobooks or digital books to a person who has dyslexia, it becomes cheating. So Jim, if you can come in and give a little bit of perspective in terms of how do these accommodations impact the population, especially from the perspective that it may be giving them an undue advantage that they may not deserve.
So we start by, in terms of some of the education of the students and the faculty, we talk about, the folks who have learning disabilities actually are the few folks who actually can say they've got documented average to above average intelligence, and they just may need another way to be assessed. And so by providing accommodations such as extended time on exams and the reading materials and all these other things, the goal is to level the playing field. So that's the way we try to explain it to the faculty members. We do have the luxury of either having students who have had neuropsych evaluations and have the assessments, or like some of the other presenters have said, we will help students find providers that will do that. And we will explain to the faculty members that these evaluations and assessments have been normed against lots of folks. And so when we come up with, let's say we come up with time and a half on an exam, this, it's not a perfect world because everybody's tests may be different, but at the same time, this particular student has been assessed and has, versus other students who have taken something standard time, been given time and a half and haven't done any better, where these students would actually be able to demonstrate what they know. So it's level playing field and being able to demonstrate what someone knows. And then sometimes I will go against academia and I will tell people, gee, since I've graduated from my master's program, you know how many tests I've taken? I haven't taken a test. Are you gonna, if you're judging how much someone has learned in a 70-minute exam, what's the difference between knowing that same information with time and a half or double time or in some other format? I think you're muted right now.
No, yeah. So I was just saying, I think I always compare it to glasses. Like we don't tell children who wear glasses in classrooms that they're cheating and they have an undue advantage. So it's much like that if a child has or a student has a condition which requires extra time, then that's what they deserve. I think this discussion has been slightly different from what I was actually imagining. I thought this would be a conversation around, let's provide technology, let's provide this. And it's really been about changing the mindsets and actually dealing with the awareness and the perspective of inclusion from an empathetic and personality perspective. And I think that's one of the challenges that we face with people who have these invisible disabilities. It's a lot easier to justify that ramp that's been built for a wheelchair than to explain that I'm giving an hour and a half, like Jim said, for an exam. And it takes somebody's time to actually monitor that. And I'm sure all your centers do it. So in the interest of time, I know we've been running very late. If there are 3 things that you would give as advice, we have a lot of administrators and universities listening in. What would be your 3 tips that you would like to give them on beginning this journey in India? Can we start with Maria?
About beginning.
I think that the first thing very important it is really training and education is create awareness among the community, the population about the challenges of dyslexia. So that the journey I think begins with that, and but also awareness among the students, because it is important for the students to be aware of how the brain works, because if they know how their challenges impact on them, they're in charge of how they can sort of progress, and they can also be sort of an active player in supporting the changes in university. So it's very important also to listen to the student voice. So that is my second tip, creating awareness among the administrator, the college, the academics, everybody inside the college, but also listen to the student voice, get the student involved, with any decision making, and then sort of move, slowly, but create a sort of showcases. You will find that there are section of the college that they're more proactive, and then they are more likely to provide a very good example of how things can be done, and starting from them and using that as an example to move forward.
Oh, thank you, Maria. Let's go to Reena.
So I think from my end, it's like Maria said, awareness definitely comes first, but that comes at a broader level. And if in India, if we have to get started with the kind of support systems in different higher education institutions, I think, Nupur, the first thing is that we need to pray for somebody being there on the other side, towards the management side, who understands, what it is all about, because it's not, this is not something which is a norm in India. Right. So even when we started the office, we did not have any model to emulate. Right. So awareness across the stakeholders is extremely important, like Maria also mentioned. And secondly, the intent. The intent has to be clear. The intent has to be honest. That this is not giving an undue advantage to a certain group of students. It is really about leveling the playing field for all kinds of learners. And third, yes, to get it's not only about the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach. I think we need this to hit from all sides, right? So everything has to align, I feel, to make these things happen, especially in a country like India. Because it takes time to implement the policies that we make so easily.
Absolutely, Reena. Jim, over to you.
Yeah, so I was worried I was going to be going too late and I might lose everybody else's, or everybody else might have provided info. One thing that, thinking about the United States and what we've been through, I would encourage you to engage with the K through 12 folks. So the folks who are coming up, because if you want to do things right, and we haven't always done things right here, sometimes there's a disconnect. So if you could partner with the K through 12 folks so that you guys are bringing students up, younger folks who then are more college ready, I think that will help. I also had in here some notes about, I think what you're doing here is something that you want to keep having these discussions. Looks like you've got a great turnout. I would put it on the road, get it out there to different groups. So that gets into the education side of things. And then I think I would continue to benchmark other institutions. Who's doing it right? And, maybe you take a trip, maybe you do the Zoom kinds of things and network with folks. Those would be my top three.
Thanks, Jim. And Dr. Shaywitz, last word.
Oh, wow. Well, so many good words have already been spoken. And I'm so happy, Jim, you brought up the K to 12, because really a major problem in the United States is that children are not screened for dyslexia. Early, our longitudinal data indicates that the achievement gap between dyslexic and typical readers is already present at first grade, and it persists. So it shouldn't be a market change going into college. So I think there needs to be screening. And also we now have, as I noted, we can screen adolescents and adults. And I think that needs to be done, because when you use the word dyslexia, I would think that different people have in their minds a totally different image of what it is. And I also think that at the beginning of the school year, there should be a discussion of dyslexia for the whole university, however you group. What is it? How often does it occur? And that, the Sea of Strengths model. So
Right.
Don't be taken by the weakness, but see the strengths and try to encourage them, and make sure there's people available who understand dyslexia and who can speak to the faculty over time. And one more, if I had a wish, it would be, and somebody, I think one of the earlier speakers mentioned it, parents are terrified of dyslexia. We have seen so many young people of a range of backgrounds, and the parents, oh, no. Let them go to the regular school, blah, blah, blah. So I think to help educate parents to be supporters and to understand and not be ashamed, whether it's they themselves or their child that is dyslexic. And I think one last comment, I think you all should be congratulated in recognizing the importance of having your university so far even be as recognizing and supportive as it is, and having this extraordinary conference. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So to conclude, there is hope. Let's not give up. Let's find the pathways and make those pathways smooth, those transitions for our students. All the parents out there like me who struggle with this on a daily basis with their children, don't get overwhelmed with their grades. Their intelligence is beyond that. And there are lots of universities in the world that actually recognize and appreciate it. Please work towards that. Faculty members, we request you, like everyone has said, to start thinking a little bit differently. The universal design helps you teach better and reach students irrespective of whether they have a difference in learning or not. Yes, Dr. Shachwitz, please do come in.
I'm so sorry to sort of.
No problem.
But I think what's really important is the 21st century scientific definition of dyslexia as an unexpected difficulty where a person can have a high level of intelligence and a much lower level of reading. The IDA, I wrote part of the IDA, it's outdated. The current definition is scientifically based on data and clinical things. So understand that it's an unexpected difficulty and disseminate that.
Yes, absolutely. And my last would be to the students, don't give up, don't lower your standards, don't stop dreaming because you think that the grades are not going to make it. There are lots of opportunities for you. Don't be pressured into dropping the sciences or the subject of your choice. You can be an economist, you can be a scientist, you can be an inventor, whatever you dream of. Find, decide, believe in yourself, and then we'll find pathways for you. Together, collectively, there is a universe out there that we can tap into. Thank you so much, everyone. A good day to you, all the panelists. Good afternoon, Maria. And over to you, Reena.
Thank you so much, Nupur. Thank you, Dr. Sally, Maria, Jim, and Marie, for your time. Yes, we are running late, but so let me just jump into the next panel, introducing Vineet Gupta, and It's an honor for me to actually talk about Vineet, because in the last panel, when I talked about, you got to be lucky to have somebody sitting on the other side, in the management side, who would understand what you're talking about when you say that we need a support center, a support office for students with dyslexia. And I must say that, Vineet is that person who was on the other side and towards the Ashoka management. He's the reason, why OLS actually got a go-ahead at Ashoka. So welcome, Vineet. A quick thing about you. Vineet is the founder and trustee of Ashoka University and Plaksha. Vineet has been the founder, pro vice chancellor at Ashoka from 2014 to 2017. He was part of this core team which ideated, which conceptualized the university in 2007. And he continues to be part of the board of management and governing body. So welcome, Vineet. Over to you and to your panel.
Well, thank you, Rina, for those kind words. I must mention that the story on, just elaborating on what Rina mentioned, I remember we took in our first class in 2014. That was a class of 124 students. And a few months later, our Dean for Academic Affairs just walked in and said, look, we have a few students and they are having a problem reading. I have to be very honest that my whole world of dyslexia, I have been very ignorant and continue to be. And Rina has really been the light and guide. And he said, how do we navigate? I mean, these people, they're quite bright, but we don't know how to really navigate this. And I think this effort started with a desire to help those. There were maybe 3 or 4 in that first class to help them navigate. Then we connected with Rina and the journey started. And I know it's become a very special effort thanks to Rina and her team. So, well, we come from the world of universities, but people with dyslexia also navigate to the world of work. And that is what this session is all about, dyslexia and the future of work. We have an outstanding panel. We have people who are dealing with this day to day at their workplaces, creating new centers of excellence, really at the cutting edge. And I think what I really got when I was speaking to some of them, how they are treating this talent as extremely special. So I'm delighted to welcome our panelists. I'll start by introducing Hiren Shukla. And as I introduce the panelists, I would request them to also switch on their videos. Hiren is the leader of the Center of Excellence for Neurodiversity at ENY. He leads ENY's internal automation efforts with key focus on leveraging distinct talent to drive innovation via ENY's Neurodiverse Centers of Excellence. His experience spans more than 20 years across accounting, strategy, automation, innovation, and change management. Welcome, Hiren. Delighted to have you on the panel. I next want to welcome Binu Matthew. Binu is the head of human resources at HP India. She's an HR professional, and for the last 19 plus years, Binu has been instrumental in providing strategic advisory support in various areas of HR. In the past 9.5 years at HP, she's focused on raising the bar on HP India's people framework. HP India won many accolades in the people engagement front, like India's top 50 companies to work for, top 10 best places to work for women, to name a few. Thank you, Binu. Delighted to have you and welcome. I also have P. Rajashekharan, whom we call fondly as Raja. He's the co-founder of Vishesh. Raja has a Master of Science in Public Policy from Carnegie Mellon University. He's the co-founder of a Chennai-based impact organization. Vishesh assists people with disabilities by providing information, training, and assistance in accessing high-quality jobs. He has a keen and deep interest, of course, in disability issues, but also in microfinance, socially responsible investment, financial inclusion, and education. Thanks, Raja, for joining in. And fourth is Rishabh Tripathi, who's Vice President at SAP. Rishabh is associated with SAP since 2001. He's held various leadership positions, and he gained recognition in the areas of development, quality management, and leadership. Rishabh is also co-leading the topic of diversity and inclusion across all entities of SAP in India. He holds a master's degree from IIIT Bangalore, an MBA from IIM Kozhikode, and leadership certification from ISB Hyderabad. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Delighted to host this panel today. The last session I was just listening through, and it was extremely interesting as the speakers were sort of navigating the world of college, right? And how students, what different colleges and institutions are doing to accommodate students with dyslexia, how they are treating this talent. And I think various questions come up. What after college? How do workplaces look at this disability? Are workplaces making special efforts to include people with dyslexia? Are workplaces really going all out and being intentional in recruiting these people, or are they reacting passively? We'd love to have some stories, some special stories on how some of these people have done during the course of their careers. So what I'll do is I'll request our panelists to come in and speak for about 3 minutes each, and talk, generally give a lay of the land on what's happening in their organizations, how do they see the landscape, what are they doing for inclusion of people with dyslexia, how do they see their careers panning out, and then we'll get into a conversation and ask them specific questions. So may I request that we start with Binu? Binu, if you'd like to go first, and then we'll follow the others.
Thank you so much, Vineet and Reena, for inviting me here. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be here today. I'm very excited because this is a topic that I'm still learning a lot on. And I think this conference has given me that opportunity to learn more. So a little about, HP and what we do here. And, as Vineet introduced me, I'm extremely passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at HP, DE&I is in our DNA. And what we look at when we hire people, it's only talent. So talent is that only criteria that we look at. Whether it's designing for accessibility or fostering an environment for inclusion of our employees of all different abilities, what we do at HP is we really work to innovate in a way that the world thinks, works, and lives for people. And especially people who are differently abled from varied backgrounds. And we also say, and always our tagline for hiring is, we are an equal opportunity employer. Now we look in the case of inclusion, we are very conscious that, we have to hire from, people from varied backgrounds. We constantly do workshops in training our hiring managers to step away from these unconscious biases. Because what we've normally noticed is always a manager wants to hire people like who are clones of themselves, right? And I always say that if you want a diverse team, you need to get people who are absolutely not like yourself. And this year, what we did differently to kind of, really, kind of imbibe this and embed this is we leveraged a theater group to do some short plays to help managers understand, and realize that inclusion is just not people with disabilities, and that means physical disabilities, but there's just so much more to this, right? And keeping an open mind when hiring, and keeping that mind of only talent being the criteria, and encouraging candidates from diverse background is what we really believe at HP. So that's a little bit of an introduction, and I'm sure, Vineet, there's more that I can talk about, but I'd like to hand it back to you so that you can pass it on to the rest of the panel.
Thanks, Binu. And now, West Hiren, thanks for sharing those views and really looking at diversity as talent is what I'm getting. Hiren, you go next.
Sure. Thank you so much, Vineet. And so excited to be here. Hiren Shukla, I am based in the US and I lead EY's talent innovation model called our Neurodiverse Centers of Excellence. And let me tell you that the future of work, as we all know it, when we think about technology and automation, the future of the worker that is most effective is one that is most creative, that can have complex problem-solving skill, and that has strong leadership and communication abilities. And 7 years ago, as a neurotypical individual, when my mind began to open and learn about the dyslexic community and other neurodivergent conditions, which are often co-occurring, it blew my mind to realize that there is this amazing untapped talent resident in all of our communities around the world that can solve the most complex problems, that can probably be the most innovative, but only if they have the psychological safety to be themselves. And I realize, as my friends Binu and Rishabh from large organizations, EY is 350,000 professionals in 150 countries around the world, we, from a business perspective, have the ability to influence government policy, academia, education systems. We have the ability to reframe what has traditionally been seen from a deficits-based perspective to a differing strengths-based perspective. And so for me, as an ally of the neurodivergent community, we're going to use our voice to drive exponential results, both to our clients and experiences to our people and our customers. So at the end of the day, the bandwagon that we're creating is so appealing that others will want to join it. And this is the inflection point on change management that, Vineet, I'm so excited to be here today. So I'll head back to you now.
Hiren, thanks and wonderful. At some point, you should also talk about your Center of Excellence. May I now invite Rishabh to share his views?
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Vineet, and great to be here and also to be listening in the last, I would say, couple of hours to the speakers and the viewpoints that kind of came in. I think it's really been extremely enlightening for me as well. Coming to what we do at SAP, and I think specifically in the area of, I would say, neurodiversity, I think SAP has been the leader in kind of identifying that this specific area. And I think quite a few years back, I think when we started this whole program on neurodiversity, at that time I think there were not too many companies which were into this. But I mean, now when we kind of look at it, I think we are kind of seen as the company where people kind of really come up to us and ask about our experiences and about how things have been and how things have worked for that. When we talk about neurodiversity, for us, we do not really differentiate, say, between the different forms. So, for example, autism, I think that's also been one of our main focus areas, but also dyslexia and others as well. And I think what we have kind of always believed in is that finally it's all about it's about business. It's about getting the best kind of results. But to kind of get the best results, we need to have teams which bring in all kinds of perspectives. And I think that is the key. And that is, I mean, something which is now being realized all around. So that it's not, I mean, having people who are differently abled is not charity, is not kindness. It's not about, I mean, doing something for the society, but it is something that makes a lot of business sense. And I think that is what is extremely important, and that is what will kind of make this sustainable, mainly because it's just not a one-off thing to kind of do this. It's not a CSR activity. Yeah? It is something which I mean, with people with different skills and different abilities, if they come together in a team, what they bring is something which makes it extremely unique. And I think that's something that we have seen with our experiences, something that we have seen really work. I think we have stories of people kind of doing extremely well, and also because of them, the team doing extremely well. So that's what is something that we have been doing. I think we'll talk more about that as well. I mean, going ahead, but that's just something that I wanted to start with, and really excited to be here, Vineet. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Raja. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, look, when recruiting this talent really makes business sense, and you're not doing this for charity or CSR. And I think in some sense, each of you articulated this. Looking at people with dyslexia as special talent, people who are bringing in a special skill to teams, to the workplace, whether it's complex problem solving, leadership, communication. And I think that perspective is just so refreshing. Raja, if I may ask you to come in, we've heard from three wonderful organizations, ENY, SAP, and HP, really talking about how they are looking at dyslexia as special talent. But being someone in the field and dealing with many organizations, would you classify these three as special organizations? What's the lay of the land? How are employers still looking at people with dyslexia? So it will be wonderful to have you share and give us a perspective on organizations in general, and perhaps what it may take to change these organizations or to put them on the path that some of the other organizations are already on.
Thanks, Vineet. First of all, many compliments to the Ashoka University and the brilliant work done by Reena and team at the Office of Learning Support. It is truly path-breaking. The work in attracting to neurodiverse talent, the outreach work that Ashoka does is truly exemplary. So, and putting this seminar and bringing this focus on this immense talent, congratulations to the team here. Before I address your question, let me talk to you a little bit about Vishesh. We are for us at Vishesh, employment is the litmus test of inclusion. A person gets a job, it's a fundamental right for everyone to get a job. But we also see that we are meeting that right and that purpose, but the societal outlook towards that individual is entirely changing. So, and we have bet ourselves as an institution as an enterprise on not only our fortunes, but our very existence, that we make enough career connects. We make career connects for people, and we get, not just the impact is created, the difference in inclusion that is created, but also we exist, we get paid from our corporates, for doing our work. So as we stay focused on these career connects, we equally stay focused on learning from people on the field, whom we serve. We serve large organizations. These organizations where we ourselves struggle to get a job. So we find pleasure in connecting our trainees with neurodivergent individuals and trainees with disabilities to jobs there, aspirational roles there, including so that's what keeps us going. We have learned from individuals and learned from these organizations, constantly evolved our service as we progressed. Specifically coming to our neurodiversity at work program, what we do is we act as a bridge between individual job seekers and their families. The anxieties are very high about what are the career opportunities, what is the door ahead, what is the tunnel ahead, etc., and the employers. So we run a program called WebCure, where we prepare neurodivergent individuals for job-ready skills, providing career guidance. And then with that deep understanding of what are those specific needs, we take that to the large organizations here on the table, and many others, to seeing how they need to look at the workplaces and what are the adjustments they might need at the workplaces to in order to ensure that the person succeeds and has a fulfilling career. On that note, I would also like to share here that, as this pipeline, there is a huge shrinkage in this pipeline, of number of people who are readily available for job market, and there is immense requirement, and we have Nandini talked about 35 million children, a number of only out of which only 500 get this service. So we're seeing immense difficulties that children and young adults with dyslexia face. And the exceptional stories of Kunal, Vivek, Varun, and Shilpa were all here who have managed exceptionally well. But on that note, we'd also want to share that we are very, very happy to share on this platform that we are starting a program specifically in partnership with Hinduja Foundation to launch a specific project to, in partnership with schools, to fundamentally alter the learning experience for children with dyslexia and all neurodivergent individuals. Hopefully, this will unlock the talent pipeline for corporates in the society to not lose out on this precious and substantial talent. 35 million is not a small number, huge talent, and this precious talent. He then talked about exceptional skills these children would bring to. We want to have more Viveks, Kunals, and Varuns contributing to the society. So, on coming to your specific question on how the landscape is, the organization landscape is, it is indeed evolving, and as we speak today, organizations are very large, or organizations surely are deeply focused on this talent pool. There is a disability diversity focus. They look at harnessing. It is no longer charity. It is about hiring. It is good practices. There is human diversity that we need to value, respect. The diverse insight that an individual is going to bring in is clearly valued. We have actually moved ahead on that pattern. But neurodiversity is also catching attention, but it's only among a handful. Even now, a lot of attention is there on autism at work. We really need to harness an autism at work program to diversify and see how that can be leveraged to really make it work for every neurodivergent individual, in multiple ways. And so we have frankly found it, when we find it difficult to only say, okay, we want to hire, are you looking at a dyslexia exclusive program? So we simply leverage on a diversity program or an autism at work program to create pathways and opportunities for individuals with dyslexia. Back to you, Vineet.
Thanks, Raja. Thank you. So clearly lots more needs to be done. Let me sort of shift gears a bit. And, I think in the life of every corporate, there may be moments when, it takes them down a certain path. And often those moments could be inspiring stories or discovering talent. And, many speakers mentioned that, all of them virtually look at dyslexia as a very special, people coming with dyslexia as people with extremely special talent, which they would love to have in their teams. And, often stories really are the pivots around which organizations get built. So would you want to share one or two, maybe each of you would like to share one or two instances of people, special people in your organizations, which really help put your organizations down the path you are? I do know some of you have those. So Binu, you want to go first, and then perhaps whoever else wants to volunteer. Yeah.
Thank you, Vineet. So I think it's very, apt for me to come in here. And the story I'm going to share is about William Hewlett. We know him as Bill Hewlett, co-founder of the Hewlett-Packard. He was expected at a very young age to attend the prestigious Stanford College because of his brightness, smartness. His early academic performance, however, did not project a Stanford acceptance. So Bill's undiagnosed dyslexia affected his writing skills in school and made any written assignment very difficult for him as a young student. Instead of letting himself fall behind and lose his college hopes, what he did differently was he trained himself to memorize everything in school. He also discovered that learning better with a hands-on approach really helped him. As a result, he gained memorization, logical skills, and that really helped him to get into Stanford. But not only that, he received 2 master's degrees in engineering. And after that, I think it's history. Bill met his friend Dave, and then together they started one of the first American electronic companies, which I'm absolutely proud to be a part of. However, what I want to leave with you all through this story is that, I think it's just his conviction and the way he did things differently Also Bill, from whatever I've read in the HP way, is like, he just rolled up his sleeve and went to the floor and started engaging on hands-on production, right? And that really helped him kind of, move forward. And really that dyslexia was something that forced him to engage his academics with a very active approach. He was also awarded the National Medal for Science in 1985. And I believe that if Bill can, anyone can. And what he's created is really history. And this is really one of the stories that has inspired us at HP. A lot of work we are doing currently is, as rightly said, on autism, but definitely something that we need to look at, like having more dedicated drives for this neurodiverse talent is something that personally I have been wanting to spearhead, and definitely will take it forward. So I just wanted to share this story. I'm sure many of you already know it, but I thought this was really apt, and coming from the rich history of HP, I was very happy to share this today. Back to you.
Thanks, Vinu. Thank you really for sharing this. Very, very, very inspiring. Hiren, Bishop, you have any bills in your back pocket with you? Any stories you would like?
Yeah, Vineet, so let me take a step back. I was remiss in my intro that EY's Neurodiverse Center of Excellence is very deliberately creating and overcoming the issues from where do you find these candidates to the interview process, which we know is often challenging for individuals, all the way to what is the support systems and ways of working that they need that allow them to be their best. So today, EY's Neurodiverse Center of Excellence is live in 5 countries around the world: the US, Canada, Spain, Poland, and with the help of our friend Raja, now in India. So we're very excited to be there. And we realize that there is awareness, education, engagement, and implementation. And that 4-step journey often takes a while because we are reframing perceptions and understanding. But Vineet, let me get to your question. So we've hired individuals that were driving an Uber or an Ola, delivering pizzas, working as a cleaner or a janitor. All of these jobs are honorable, hardworking jobs with dignity. Except if the focus of the individual and capability, for example, the individual who was delivering pizzas, 3 weeks after starting at EY, he was writing artificial intelligence machine learning algorithms for EY's artificial intelligence lab. If you think about the disparity of that individual who had applied to more than 500 different positions, has a data science background, and could not get a second interview because of the corporate structure of how interviews are being done, he did not perform well in interviews. But if you gave him a performance-based test and allowed his creativity to come out, you often found that thinking differently is a key strength. And I would say, last but not least, Vineet, that individual and the 250 team members, combined with the thousands of neurodivergent employees at the EY that we already have at senior levels, all the way down to the most junior levels, our team of 250 today has driven over $650 million of savings, both in top line revenue for EY. We have created process optimization and saved 2.6 million man hours for our clients and for EY. And so, Vineet, what's amazing is our team members are bringing their strengths out, and that strength is changing their lives and allowing them to be self-sufficient, happy, successful, and productive.
Wow, wonderful. And Hiren, maybe that's what explains I was wondering why it's called a center of excellence. And, wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Rishabh, you have any stories to add to this?
I mean, more than the stories, I think the stories are, are quite a few. Yeah. And I think in different areas that we have. But I think just to kind of also take on to what, Raja was talking about, I think specifically, I think in the area of I mean, that how do we kind of extend, because as he rightly said, I mean, when we talk about neurodiversity, I think the first thing that comes in mind is mostly the autism at work. And how does this get extended to the other areas of neurodiversity as well? And I think that's been, I think, one of the journeys I would say for us as well, because we started very strongly on the Autism at Work program. But I think to be able to then identify and to be able to kind of engage and to be able to kind of diversify into other areas of neurodiversity, I think that's been one of the interesting, I would say, I mean, divergences that we have also taken. And I think, and that's where what we see, I mean, and as we all know, and I think we have heard things in the past as well, in terms of, again, what is it that I mean, these individuals bring to the table. And I think that is where we talk about creativity, right? And I think maybe when we talk about a story, I can talk about a story of maybe I mean, close family friends, and I think they have a daughter who was identified pretty early, in fact, in her even before a primary class, as someone with dyslexia. And I think the way, I mean, the way that she kind of brings the creativity to work, I mean, as compared to some of, I mean, when we look at the children kind of playing together, and I think what she brings to the table is so very different and unique. And of course, I think the kids are small. At times, they would also be like, okay, some of them would be like, oh, she's not able to even spell this or whatever. But then I think she is able to overcompensate that through some of the other areas in which she's brilliant at. And I think that's what I think, I mean, this is all about. I think that each one has their own strengths, and how do they kind of come together to kind of, yeah, make it all better. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Rishabh. Okay, the one question I had for some of you, are organizations like yours now actively seeking and recruiting people with special talents like dyslexia, or are these things you discover in the workforce and then find ways to make some, these performances special? And maybe Rishabh, you can start, since I see you on the screen, and we can go in the reverse order this time.
Yeah, sure, Vineet. And I think this is where definitely, as I mentioned in the beginning as well, that I think we had a kind of a head start as well. I mean, as compared to some of the other companies, where I think this was identified as an area. I mean, as a talent place as well for. And this started also as a global program, I think, with India, in fact, in our case, leading the way for that. And that's where we started with this overall program for, in the case of neurodiversity. And yes, I mean, I would say that what we, of course, believe in and what we go for is equal opportunities. But to kind of get to those equal opportunities, we do go out specifically hunting for individuals who are differently abled. Yeah, so we kind of engage with organizations like I mean, Raja's Vishesh, or I mean, like organizations like Enable India, or I mean, other agencies which are able to kind of connect us to the kind of talent that we would be kind of looking for hiring. And I think that's something which I would say, so for us, it's definitely not accidental, but it is something which is intentional and something that we are kind of pursuing, because, as I said, I think we see a huge value add in this.
Right. Hiren, I'm sure your answer would be the same, but just sort of adding on, how do you see the pipeline of such talent? What do you expect institutions or colleges like Ashoka or many others? What would you expect from them?
Yeah, thank you. We need, so the war on talent is real. We have seen, by the way, in our Center of Excellence, over the last 6 years, 92% retention. And I repeat that, 92%, which is unheard of, right, in today's day and age. And we're talking data science, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cybersecurity, the hardest skills to find and retain. We are on a global mission at EY to actively create those partnerships, Vineet, with Ashoka and other orgs, because we realize there is a bridge program required from learning to support systems with organizations like Vishesh to the corporate environment. And how do we create a support structure that allows individuals and managers and leaders to better understand the power of equity and belonging. And so for us, we are looking to hire thousands of individuals around the world and create the most receptive environment for psychological safety. I think, Vineet, this is where the learnings of Ashoka and Yale, and we're now engaged with Stanford and Oxford, where we're going to codify these learnings and we're going to help push them out to others. Because to be clear, this is a collaboration opportunity. Collaboration not only across business, but government, academia, NGOs, and public and self-advocacy groups. And so as EY goes to continue leveraging our global footprint around the world to do, we realize, Vineet, without yourself and and Raja and the Visheshas of the world, we are not going to be able to accomplish exponential results.
Right. No, thank you. Thanks, Sirin. That's wonderful. Binu, if I may also ask you to come in and really also talk about another aspect. How does it mean to align people in your own organization around this mission?
Yeah.
Do you think it's very intentional? Do you think you now see more support from your team leads who are asking for such talent? How do you see that journey playing out?
I think it's extremely important to have a leadership intent. And I kind of agree with what Rishabh said. It just can't be something that we talk about one day and forget about, like the HR strategy at HP is called the intentional people strategy, and DE&I is one of our pillars under that. So I think if we have the right intent, and if it comes, with the leadership kind of, portraying, the value of these people, because we also have a large engineering group that is into innovation and R&D. And, I feel that this creative talent is really going to add so much more. Honestly, as I've said earlier, we have focused a lot on autism. We've been engaged with, persons with disabilities, like physical disabilities. We've worked very closely with Enable India, but this is a window of opportunity. And I think definitely we have the intent and we want to focus on it, Vineet.
And would you have your team leads really calling up and saying, look, we need this sort of talent? Or is it still more counseling, taking them through some sort of education, giving them some inspiring case studies?
Absolutely. I think at this juncture, we need to educate a little more. They're not there yet where they are asking for the talent, but I'm sure we will get there. It's a little early stage at HP India for sure.
Maybe I can just come in for a second on this as well. So I mean, as I think Hiren was talking some time earlier, I think we being at a point of inflection. Yeah, and I think that's where, I mean, if I look back just maybe a few years back versus now, the change that I see, I think 5 years back when this whole idea, because I mean, there is a central team which tries to kind of push this a little bit, and then there is the businesses which are finally into the hiring of this. So I would say maybe a few years back, we would see the kind of reaction which were like absolutely, I would say, negative, or a lot of apprehension that, okay, I will not, or I would not like to, or I mean, there had to be a little bit of push to kind of do that. Versus now, when we say, I mean, it's still not, I mean, as Binu said, something like people want that, or maybe some of them do, but it's not all. But what we see is that people are more agreeable or acceptable to it. So it's like not like, okay, I might have to spend a little bit more effort, I need to do this. So I mean, I'd rather get away with it. But I think people say, okay, let's look at the talent and see, I mean, how this person is, and then we can take a call. So I think that itself is a shift. Of course, we still have a long way to go, but that's something which I just wanted to kind of also say.
Right. Raja, if I may have you come in, and maybe then we will just have some closing comments. I know it's already late and the session is. What do you think organizations can do more? We have 3 great examples. But what would your wish list be for organizations? And perhaps there are many here in the audience who are listening in.
Sure. Thanks, Vineet. I think the platform, the foundation, the inflection point is set. If you really think deeply about it, what are we talking? The dividing line between what is an accommodation required for a neurodiverse condition and what is an HR practice, the fitting into the norm practice, that is to be questioned. So as Hiren talked about, the conventional process of recruitment really needs to be put to test. And when we put that to test, we are actually removing more and more biases. You are clearing the path for more and more individuals to participate in a corporate setup. So the inflection point is very exciting times. So this needs to be accelerated. We need more center of excellences. It has to be normalized, if I may say, the entire. If you create a recruitment pathway for neurodiverse setup, Rishabh talked about autism. If you already created a pathway for individuals with autism, you naturally would be able to include dyslexia, ADHD. It is the same, the conventional, and not only that, we are all on a spectrum, and it becomes a better practice for the war on talent is going to be won by companies who are going to be narrowly focused on this narrow pathway of creating it for people with the neurodiverse spectrum. Having said that, a lot of times, yes, these are known difficulties, reading, spelling, writing. But more than that, for dyslexia, there is also challenges with timekeeping, organization skills, etc., etc. So if organizations are able to build their systems, the recruitment and inclusion practices to recognize these, you meet one person with dyslexia, you meet one person with dyslexia. Same with any of the other neurodivergent conditions. So if you're able to create that, you're actually paying attention to that individual, and that is simply better HR practice. And you're unlocking a potential of many in the organization. So my wish list is focus on neurodiversity. You focus on diversity at large. Back to you, Vineet.
Very well said, Raja. Thank you. Okay, I think this has been a wonderful conversation. We can keep going on and on. I must say that, this has been tremendously educative for me. And I am just so inspired that a lot of your organizations are taking the lead, and one just feels that we are all part of a community that can champion this. Before we close, I would just like all of you to make some closing comments to all such students with these special talents, if I may say, and to all parents who may be worried. What would you want to tell them? Maybe Hiren, let's have you go first this time.
Sure. Thank you, Vineet. I think that I would say the future is very bright. I see that we are moving from a charitable perspective to a value-driven model here. And I would say, Vineet, lastly, this is a massive collaboration opportunity, but if we're going to move mountains, we need to do it together. And so in that regard, I will put my money where my mouth is. Wherever I can help share EY's journey, our models, our focus, or anybody would like information so we can help amplify the value that we've seen here, I would love to do that. And with that, Vineet, I would say for students and others, please know, being who you are and staying true to that with organizations that value you is exactly where you should be. Pretending or having to mask or camouflage will only cause stress, anxiety, depression, and a whole host of other mental health issues. And so at the end of the day, the world needs to shape around you versus you around the world.
Wonderful. Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said, Hiren. Rishabh, you want to come in next?
Sure. Yeah, I think Hiren, I completely agree with what Hiren said, and I think specifically for students, I think that yes, I think they just need not worry, and they just bring their best to the forefront, and things will be good. I just want to maybe just say maybe additionally one thing to the corporates as well, that I think we have discussed about the value add and other things, but I think what is very important is that what you do at your workplace to kind of make it psychologically safe, and in terms of the way that they are able to bring their best at work as well. And I think that's very, very important. And I think that's a call out that I would like to do, that the need to kind of take help from specialized organizations. You need to kind of really do your homework well. I mean, it's just not about hiring, but it's about kind of ensuring that the person kind of comes in and able to settle down, feel safe, and then is able to kind of bring his best. So I think that it's a journey, and we need to kind of be on the path of the journey for individuals. And I think that that's also, I mean, something which I would just want to make call out to the corporate. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Rishabh. Binu?
Yes. So firstly, I think this was an amazing session. It was extremely, eye-opening for me. And to the students, my message would be like, you are absolutely not, you cannot be put down. You have amazing skills. And I'm sure that, corporates who really want you will get you. So don't even think of, where do we go? Knock at the doors of who really want to, kind of invite you with open arms. And at HP, we believe that you can bring your whole selves to work. So for me personally, I think it was a learning journey, and Hiren, Rishabh definitely will be in touch with y'all, Raja as well, because there is a lot more to learn. I believe that this is a learning journey, and I'm very humbled to say that we have a long way to go. And if you have the mindset, I'm sure anything can be achieved. So thanks again, Vineet, for inviting me here.
Thank you. Very well said, Binu. And Raja, just closing comments from you finally.
Yeah. Thanks, Vineet. I would say to parents and children, the students, these are changing times, exciting times. Be what you are, and especially to parents, recognize, I mean, we're not talking about, there are people with specific gifts, but special gifts, but be what you are. Don't try to fit in. It is for the organization and the society. We need this diversity. The diversity is what is making the difference. So please be what you are. Continue acquiring your skills, and keep challenging all of us. All of us have spoken here. Please keep challenging us to do more. And with that, I would hand it back to you.
Well, thank you. This has been such a wonderful panel. Be who you are, and corporates who value you will find you. I think maybe let's end on that note. It's just been wonderful to host all of you. Please do continue to do the things you do. It really makes this mission so meaningful. And as Hiren said, perhaps together we can move a mountain. Thank you. And we are at the end of this panel. I would hand back to Nupur, who's a fellow trustee at Ashoka and also a co-traveler in this journey. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Vinny. Thank you, everyone. I just want to take this opportunity. Unfortunately, due to the paucity of time, we can't take questions from our audience, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone, Mrs. Kurawala, for setting the stage, being a path breaker in our journey in India on recognizing dyslexia. Mrs. Ritu Sen, for being so accepting and leading the change that we need in our country today. Thank you for agreeing to collaborate with us. I'm sure many of us who are listening in today will be reaching out. To our voices, Virat, Kunal, Shilpa, Vivek, thank you for speaking up. This is a hidden disability that most people are ashamed of talking, and I know you've encouraged a lot more people to speak up. Your stories are inspiring. Please keep, forging ahead like you all have. Dr. Sally Shewitz and Dr. Nandini, one of the biggest stigmas we fight is that dyslexia is a myth and an excuse for laziness. Thank you for bringing out the scientific aspect, and that actually it does exist in the brain. There is a physical condition. To our guides from universities across the world, Marie, Jim, Maria, thank you for your advice. I'm sure as we embark on this journey in India, a lot of us will be reaching out to you for more tips and tools, and we thank you for our time. Vineet, you are a path breaker. You have always been very, very progressive in the way you helped form Ashoka. Thank you for this discussion. Hiren, Binu, Raja, and Rishabh, it is so heartening to hear from you about these excellent opportunities. And I can't end before thanking the Ashoka team, who at the background from outreach, IT, global education have been at it for nights, because this was something that Reena, Chandana, and myself thought of 3 weeks ago that we should do this, and they sort of jumped in and helped us. Malvika ma'am, your leadership, at Ashoka is very critical to make a lot of this happen. Thank you. But before I end, I really do want to thank Reena for her leadership and making all of this come together. Chandana, my fellow parent advocate, who we spend nights in nightmares about what will happen to our children. And today this conversation for me has been one of learning, of hope and belief that my child has a bright future ahead and all the things are getting laid for her success. I do hope a lot of you all are feeling that. And to our lovely participants who stuck out for such a long time, even though we ran over, thank you very much. So big hand to all of you all for sticking in, and we hope to continue these conversations till they're needed. Good night, good afternoon, good morning to whoever in the different time zones.